Welcome, I am DesignerDave, and this is the Warcraft III Ask Me Anything That You Never Got. Let's talk about me for a little bit. As you may or may not know, I was one of the campaign designers for Warcraft III, Reign of Chaos, and the Frozen Throne. I did the culling of Stratholme and several others, but people only really remember the culling of Stratholme. And I was responsible for a large number of the in-game cinematics and for many of some of the most appreciated Easter eggs, which is something that I in particular am fond of, putting Easter eggs into games. But I was only one person of, I believe, a 9-person campaign design team. So I can't take credit for everything, and I can't answer every question because I don't know what other people necessarily were thinking, but I will try to the best of my ability. Question number 1. How much freedom did you have when designing campaign levels? Were you told how to set up the level, or did you just get some story outline and you could do whatever you wanted with it? Well, interestingly, we had quite a bit of freedom. When it came to the campaign levels, we were basically given a script written by Chris Metzen, and we would all sit around a round table, and read it together. And then when someone sort of felt like, oh, this is a level that speaks to me, they would grab it. That's what happened with me in the Culling of Stratholme. As soon as I saw Arthas was going to be slaughtering villagers, I'm like, oh yeah, that's so me. I'm taking this one. I believe I called Dibs. And then once you are the campaign owner of that mission, you have free reign to do basically whatever you want. There are only a few things that have to be considered, which is that it has to follow the dialogue script. So those have to be in the mission somewhere, and it has to make sense, obviously. And what you're doing in general has to make sense. So when it came to the Culling of Stratholme, the script was like, yeah, Arthas is going to call the city. Well, sure, that's exactly what I did. I made a map where you call the city against an opponent who was also turning them into zombies. And once that's decided, you opened up a new map. You picked the correct tile set and your base layer, whatever that might be. Some people like to work with grass initially. I usually worked with grass initially. You picked your height and width. It was all up to you. Everything was completely under your control, and then you just started laying out your terrain and texturing and putting down paths and choosing your locations and then editing the triggers. It was entirely up to the level designer. It was a lot of fun. It was also a lot of hard work, so I don't want to gloss over that component of it. We had free reign to do pretty much as we pleased. Were there ever any plans for expansions post Frozen Throne? No. Once we do the expansion, that's basically it. I don't know if you've noticed this in Blizzard's history, but basically any second expansion was often done by another studio. I don't think that's a tradition that we carried on. And it's not because we couldn't do another expansion. It's just because people were so burned out at that point. Because you have to understand that Warcraft III Reign of Chaos basically went straight into the Frozen Throne. There was like a month off where people who were basically dead from over a year of crunch had lost their minds, and so you needed some time off to get over that. But then you just came back and you started working on the Frozen Throne. I'll say this for the expansion though, doing a game and then doing an expansion for it is always a good idea, because once you finish the game, you sort of have a complete set of tools and you have a good idea of how to use them, and everyone on the team is experienced with it. So the expansion, it moves so much faster because almost all the decisions are kind of already made. And when it comes to the story and stuff, people are moving very quickly on it because they've already got an idea in their head of what else they wanted to do and all the missed opportunities from the previous ones. I wish more studios would go with that model of development, where they create the big game, the new release, and then they do an expansion for it, where they refine all the edges, and now that they know all the tools, they do like the really cool stuff that they wanted to do. It wasn't exactly like that for Warcraft 3 because there was time constraints and things like that, but it's pretty much how it went. Were there any plans or ideas for another Warcraft 3 campaign after founding of Durotar? No. Yeah, I'm just going to go with a simple no on that one. These 2 questions should have been complete. All right, that's fine. Do you prefer normal campaign style or the founding of Durotar WoW version 0.5 campaign style playing and working on? Okay, I understand. So the founding of Durotar has a unique backstory to it, which is that there was not going to be an orc campaign for the Frozen Throne. It was just going to be removed for time constraints, and so that we could have a relatively stable, easy, and breezy, campaign an amount of time to get the game out. Now, that said, it was Tim Campbell's idea to do the founding of Durotar in that Diablo style, and he pretty much did most of that himself in terms of it was his concept and he pushed for it and made it happen. I know he got help from a bunch of designers on that, including myself. But if it were not for Tim Campbell, that campaign would not exist. In terms of doing another version of it or expanding on it, no, that never came up because it was quite a chunk to chew for the development cycle of the Frozen Throne. So in terms of whether or not I prefer that campaign style, yeah, I do actually enjoy that sort of campaign style a little bit better because it gives you that sense of continuity and it gives you a larger area within which to tell different stories and have a combined sort of story. So I do prefer them, but they are quite painful to create. What are some examples of story elements and missions that were scrapped entirely? So this one I already had notes for because I had to think about this one for a little bit. So a lot of people already sort of know about this, but Jaina was actually supposed to die in one of the early human missions as a motivation for Arthas. And that was obviously scrapped, both because you didn't really get to know Jaina well enough, and because it's sort of the fridge trope from comics. It was sort of a little bit tired. This is actually one of those things that's quite interesting from how Blizzard operated, at least back then, was that the campaign designers would read through the scripts and then they would give feedback, and our feedback was, this doesn't make a lot of sense because we just met her and now she's gone. So it doesn't work as a motivation for Arthas, and he's already got plenty of motivation. He's trying to save his kingdom from the undead. So it wasn't needed, and why kill a cool character and so on. And yeah, Jaina has gone on to be an important character in World of Warcraft as well. Another one is Illidan was initially a satyr. When we first read the script, he was a satyr, and he sort of spoke like a satyr from Shakespeare. He had that sort of kind of prose. If you're not familiar with Shakespeare, you'll get the idea. Not that it was completely like Shakespeare, but it was definitely prose. And we all were not feeling it, so he scrapped that, and Illidan became the demon hunter, and it worked a lot better, obviously. And Illidan, I think, is one of the most interesting characters from the series as well. And the final mission where you slow down Archimonde's ascent to the World Tree was the big one that got scrapped. So there was some people know about this, but there was another mission in Reign of Chaos at the end that would have been the precursor to the cinematic, where all the Night Elf sperm attacks him and gets into his pores or whatever they do. There was going to be a mission where he's actually slowly walking up this hill and you're doing things to slow him down, but it just didn't work. It just wasn't fun, and it felt very anticlimactic after the huge battle in the previous mission. So it was scrapped pretty late in the game, pretty close to Gold Master. Was Jaina supposed to die in Call to the Damned? Yes, I just explained that. So I sort of answered two questions at once. I think that's why I paired them together like that. That's sort of how I picked these, is that the ones that were close enough I would put together. What was involved in the original final mission of defending the World Tree? So as I stated earlier, it was basically a giant Archimonde, scaled up quite large, and moving up a hill towards the tree, and we had the branches of Yggdrasil kind of strewn throughout the mission. We had art for that, and you would build defenses, basically. So you'd build towers and things like that, and he would have to take time to destroy them. But really, there were too many ways to cheese it, and it just wasn't that interesting. It was like a slow-moving thing that you couldn't stop. You literally couldn't stop it, because the whole point is that he gets to the World Tree. So it was a mission you were going to lose, and then you're just sort of fighting a timer. And I've had a huge rant about timer missions like that, where there's a point of no return where you realize that you failed and there's nothing you can do about it, no matter how much time is left on the clock. But you have to keep going anyways, or you cancel and start over, and you're never really sure where that point is, and it's just frustrating. So it was super anticlimactic compared to the previous mission. If you were to make a new campaign today, what kind of stuff would you put in there? And would you make a new race with a new tech tree in it? Which race, if so? Yeah. If we were to make a new campaign today, I would do... split the elves, the dwarves, the gnomes, and various other races. And I'd have like 10 different races and build entirely new tech trees and everything for them and new units for them. I think the thing at the time, it's tough to balance an RTS. In when it comes to having 4 different races, it's very difficult to keep something like that balanced. And that was where the majority of time was spent, was balancing those units. And I don't think it ever actually... I don't even know if to this day it's balanced or if it's just good enough that people accept it. So, with that in mind, the most fun is creating those units, coming up with the designs for what would the elves do if they were on their own, or what would the dwarves be like if they're on their own. So similar to how we did something with the blood elves, with like we had obvious limitations, but it would be fun to revisit that, and with art support and design support and code support, create entirely different tech trees and everything, and sort of delve into what would the dwarves be like, and so forth. In terms of a new campaign, I would like to do some sort of prequel Warcraft 3 story, because we saw how things were when a huge demonic threat was coming down, and that's sort of something you need to drive a story like that. But much like the founding of Durotar campaign, I'd like to see a more sprawling, slower paced kind of story that delves into each of the races and sort of goes into their backstories and histories, and why they were warring and what brought them together. I mean, initially it was the orc threat, but I think that story hasn't been told for Warcraft in the right way, but maybe that's just me. Do you see any missed opportunities in Warcraft 3 or any of its missions? Yeah, I see nothing but missed opportunities. That's the problem when you're making these things, is after the fact, you think of all the stuff that you would have put in if you had had the time. Now, that being said, there's nothing in particular that I would change about Warcraft 3 now. It's more that there's like a degree of polish that I think we could have even gone a step further. That said, I wish that we had done more interesting side missions and more branching paths, because that was the thing that for me would have been the most interesting, is to have a branching storyline where you get multiple different types of endings depending on what choices you made. And I think choices in RTS games means I destroy this guy and I don't destroy that guy, and that has consequences down the road, and we never did anything with it because we were so afraid of the fallout of that, is that you now have all these missions with all these different things that you have to keep track of. But I think we should have just bit the bullet and did it. I mean, if Mass Effect can track your story choices, certainly we could too. Granted, it has different impacts in an RTS, and we have to be careful that some missions don't become unplayable, or it still has to follow the main storyline. But we could have done that, and I think we just got lazy or scared. So I wish we'd done a branching storyline, and then there would be the base canon, and then there would be the alternative endings, and I think that would have been really, really cool. Of course, it would have required more cinematics, but because of how long it takes to make the cinematics for Warcraft 3, that would not have been possible to have different cinematics for each one. But maybe we could have done animatics. Missed opportunities. What was the thinking behind the expansion human campaign being focused solely on the Blood Elves and their technology tree that is different from that of melee maps? And let's combine it with the next one, question 11. Why were there so many custom unit races in the Curse of the Blood Elves? It's because we wanted to have another race and show another tech tree, and so we sort of just took it upon ourselves to do that. I believe it was Tim who primarily wanted to do that. And a little bit of back lore, I guess. I wrote the lines of dialogue for the elven, blood elf engineer.
No, not like that. Let me do it. I'll have it up in no time. 2 + 3 × what do you want?
So, one of the earliest bits of writing that actually resulted in voiced dialogue. So I was super excited about that. And the thinking was that players would be bored with the normal tech trees. So we just wanted to give them a new tech tree. Here's, like, try this out. Now, granted, it wasn't amazing, but it was different. And that was sort of the main thing that we wanted to focus on in the campaign missions. It's like, we're not teaching the game. This is like, we're doing this for story purposes, and so we can do whatever we want because it's cool. Hopefully people liked it, and well, I mean, Warcraft 3 and the Frozen Throne are all-time top games, I think. So why does Tichondrius have a sheep on digging up the dead? Let's go look. Let's look at that. So I thought it would be fun to basically open up the map editor and see these things for ourselves. I don't remember everything I did. Let's be real. It's been a long time. It's been almost 20 years. Now, as I recall, where is his sheep, you say? You say he has a sheep, but I don't see it. Where is Tichondrius' sheep? Oh, you are correct. He doesn't drop anything. He's neutral. Okay. I know who did this. During development, the maps can pass through several campaign designers' hands. One of those campaign designers is David Hale, and I believe he's the one who put the sheep in here. I remember him mentioning something about, I gave him a sheep, and I didn't know what he meant. Now I do. So, Tichondrius has a sheep because Dave Hale thought it would be funny if Tichondrius had a sheep. He also named some of the characters. Let's see if we can find them. God, it's been so long. Is there one that brings up all the units? Aha. Here we go. Custom. So here you can see all the custom named units. Balcor, Dirk, Garak, Hebon, Joseph, Kenshin, and Leanna. Kenshin's a reference to Rurouni Kenshin, and I was a big fan of that anime at the time, so I would slip in references to it periodically. It's also in my StarCraft Trigger Map of the Month program map, Deception, as one of the terminals you can find. Lots of doggos. This doggo has triggers. A unit enters near Kel'Thuzad. Entering unit equal to Arthas is false. Oh, it's when Arthas gets him near him. Why is there a dog in this one? Where's the dog? So all of this, like, removing all the buffs and stuff, is just to not have those buffs in the cinematic. So you get near Kel'Thuzad. I'm not sure why the dog is referenced in here. That's quite strange. Oh, I know. Okay, so this is the Kel'Thuzad cinematic. So this is actually over here. There's a dog here. And I guess he has the dog howl or something. Maybe it's for sound. See, there's so many things that went into these maps. There's no way to know. There's no way to know. One thing that we don't have is a find option, which would have been great. Because if I could hit Control F right now and find the dog, that would be super beneficial. There it is. Lock Arthas' head to face dog. Oh my god, that's right! If you wanted Arthas to look at something, at that point in development, you would have to use a unit and face something. And so, I guess I used the dog. Oh, the memories. Because you have to remember that during Reign of Chaos, the map editor was in development at the same time. So sometimes we didn't have things like turning the head. And so I used a shortcut, or a cheat, and I put this dog, who's trapped here in this corner, and Arthas faces the dog during the cinematic to do, for the purposes of the cinematic, to make it more dramatic. That's a lot of work for just a head turn. But back then it was important to us, these sort of small details. So, it's funny what you can remember just looking at the map editor. The answer is because Dave Hale thought it was funny. But the sheep doesn't have any triggers or anything, so there's no real reason for it. Question 14. Why was Curse of the Blood Elf such a short campaign? Was more planned for it? No. So it was short because... so keep in mind that Reign of Chaos was a game that was 5 years in development. And I'd say a good year and a half of that, if not 2 years, was the campaign being made. From the storyline to the tools, the editor, to the actual campaign itself. So that took 2 years. We had a good understanding of the tools. But now keep in mind, Reign of Chaos finishes and releases. Everyone's brain is fried. We all go on vacation for like at least a month. The Frozen Throne production starts immediately upon your return. People are still like chilling from their vacation. Things are moving slowly. Basically, we were like, we have 1 year to do the expansion. That was always sort of the, this is what's going to happen. But really, it was more like 9 months because people just were, it took a while to get back into the groove. So at that point, what we decided as a team was that if we weren't feeling it, we would just cut it. And I think a large part of that was that Tim wanted to spend more time on the Durotar campaign for the orcs, which we were not going to have an orc mission at all. So we have to move that time around somewhere, right? So if we're doing an orc mission, if we're doing an orc campaign when we weren't going to do one, then let's take a little bit from the Blood Elf campaign, which it had a lot of cool missions and stuff, but the story was kind of told pretty quick. It didn't need as many missions maybe as others would. I'm gonna put because we wanted orc stuff. I think that works. But Tim could tell you more about that. What's the story behind the founding of Durotar? Why was it made into an RPG style campaign? Who was behind its creation? And did you have a part in its design and creation? Tim Campbell, 100%. He was largely responsible for many of the cool things that you saw in the founding of Durotar. In fact, without him, that campaign mission, the orcs having a campaign at all, never would have happened. And then if you want to see who Tim Campbell is, here he is. Tim Campbell, game director and president, former game director of Wasteland 3, lead campaign. See, I've worked with him on Wasteland 3 too, so we go back a ways. There you go. Now you know. Did you actually use the world editor to make the missions? How was it different as a program back then? Yes, 100%. We used the world editor to make all the campaign missions with very little deviation from what you guys got at the end, except that our tools were incomplete. So at the time of making Reign of Chaos, there were things that we just didn't have. And we sort of had to make hacks to work around it, or just figure it out, or just skip that content and do something else. So that it could be quite frustrating when we were making the campaign. But ultimately, we were making the campaign editor, the map editor, for release. And we wanted the campaign editor that we made the campaign with to be the thing that people got and could use. The only thing I'm disappointed in is that we locked all the campaign maps, because I think there was no reason to do that other than size constraints, because it had to fit on a disk, so we had compression, so maybe that was the reason. But it would have been nice if after the fact we had released them. And I think now you can just go and open them. But though in my case I had to rely on another tool to do that. But yeah, the trigger editor, the triggers and all that are exactly the same thing that you guys have. We didn't do anything different except on 2 missions. There are cases where programmers actually had to go in, and because we wanted to do something so complicated that the trigger editor couldn't handle it, or it would choke the CPU or GPU, it would cause problems. So in those cases, they would, in those 2 cases that I remember, they would edit it in direct code. And that was Mike Morheim edited Calling of Stratholme. There's a couple triggers there that he turned into actual code, and I believe Michael Heiberg edited one of his missions that had a moving wagon. I can't remember which one that was. Oh yeah, that's the Culling. Hello, Culling, my old friend. Oh, the memories. It's been so long. Oh, right. I wanted to show you where the triggers have been edited. Oh, man. Oh, the pain. Oh, waterfalls. So important. And it's in here. It's gotta be. Yeah. Look at that. So you can see here that this is code. Those aren't triggers. These are triggers. This is code. So when Mike Morheim was fixing my map, see, I made my map so complicated that the president of the company had to come and go back to coding to fix it. Anyways, if you open up the culling of Stratholme, you can see where actual code was used to make things work. I literally can't read this. I never understood what he did. But, all the triggers stuff, that was my stuff. And then when he was fixing it, he was like, let's just do it in code. And if you can do that, great. What you got at release was better than what we had when we were making the campaign. Think about that. Did you make the cutscenes and the missions, or was that a different set of developers? Yes, I did. I did a lot of them. So let's open the cinematics. So one thing with the cinematics was that about halfway through development, Mike Heiberg came up with like a template for cinematics that helped a lot, made it easier. Because the main thing was like, let me find the most famous cinematic of all time. To make our cinematics skippable, we had to account for all the things that could happen during the cinematic that we wanted to maintain. So every cinematic has a cancel set of triggers that has to be there. This is me creating groups of units for the cinematic so that they all move together and do things. If you watched my live stream a little while back, you'll see where I edited this already. So this is actually slightly different than the original culling, but it's just mostly to improve little elements of it because I wanted to fix some of the camera angles. But yeah, I would go in, I would place cameras, and then one of the best tricks to do is you just want that camera to be constantly moving to give that feeling of motion throughout. And so otherwise it's just two stagnant characters talking at each other. And you can do little head movements and slight animations and stuff, but that feeling of movement from the camera panning around and moving from position to position to sort of give it more ambiance and character, it's really important and something that unfortunately was missing in Reforged. But yeah, I did a lot of cinematics, and I was really into these. I think I fancied myself a director at some point in my life. And what was so fun about the cinematic stuff was that you were basically making a movie. And at the time, that kind of blew my mind because I had complete control over all the actors and stuff. Yeah, the script was already done, so I wasn't doing anything with that. But you'll see that I had a few Easter eggs where I took some creative license and took some voice lines that weren't necessarily supposed to be intended for the purposes that I used them for. Oh, later in development, the artists actually did come in and do some of the cinematics. And they also gave me a book on cinematography where I learned about how you're not supposed to flip the camera more than 180 degrees, which I did in the culling of Stratholme, the opening cinematic. How was working on Frozen Throne levels different from working on Reign of Chaos ones? It was a lot faster paced, I'll say that. But also, we knew the tools at this point, so we just sort of knew what we were doing, and things came together a lot quicker. So we would have playable missions rapidly, way before we would on the Reign of Chaos missions. And that's probably why Tim invested so much time into the Founding of Durotar campaign mission and making it that different style, is because he realized we can do all these things, so let's show what we can do. It was faster paced, but easier overall. And that just comes from knowledge. The more you know the tools, the easier it is to use them. Why is the Scourge of Lordaeron the only campaign to feature epilogue text on the last level? So the reason for that is that it was confusing. The confusion came from people were like, hey, I just got Frostmourne and now I'm ready to come home and save my town. And then Arthas murders his dad. Spoilers. So it felt, some people felt that there was a little bit more explanation needed. And because it was sort of the epic of Arthas, or at least his human life, it needed a little bit more of a transition than it got. Because it wasn't clear necessarily from the cinematic what was going on in his, or what had happened to him. Because you just got the sword, and yeah, you did some crazy stuff all along the way, but it needed a little bit more than that. So after taking his vengeance upon Mal'Ganis, Prince Arthas wandered off into the frozen wastelands of Northrend. Tormented by Frostmourne's maddening voice, Arthas lost the last vestiges of his sanity. Kind of a cop-out, in my opinion. Now, driven by the sword's dark will, Arthas plans to return home to Lordaeron and claim his just reward. So, yeah. Basically, it was that the transition between the end of the mission, without the epilogue text, and the cinematic was a little too harsh. So we came up with this, or someone did. And it was implemented in the map editor. So you can do your own epilogue text yourself. Did you have any voice lines in the game? I don't know for sure, but I did do a couple readings. But I don't think they were used. There's the footman who gets killed, but it's like a warning that her dad is there. And I think I did a reading of that line. It's like, Mistress Jaina, your father would be... something along those lines.
Mistress Jaina, we found you at last. The Admiral will be overjoyed.
And I did try to do a reading for like the ogres and stuff. This way, no that way, that kind of stuff. But I don't think they used anything that I did. I was more on the writing side of things. So all the Blood Elf Engineer lines are mine. So that's a claim to fame. Is it an offense to the original developers of Warcraft 3 if fans rewrite the game engine into an open source version that can run the maps and models? No, totally do that. Do whatever you want, man. In my opinion, it should all be open source and free. I am not offended, but it would be illegal. Beware the eye of Activision. It's just the sad truth is that we don't do open source stuff anymore. I mean, some games do, but Blizzard definitely not. All that stuff's proprietary, and if you try to do that kind of stuff, I guess you could reverse engineer it. Yeah, there was a game company in Korea that reverse engineered StarCraft, I want to say, and made their own game. Kingdom Under Fire? Something like that. And then Blizzard sued them because they had like clearly cut copy-pasted code. There was stuff in there that was like straight up one-to-one. Like it wasn't reverse engineered at that point. And then I think what they ended up doing was they changed their game a little bit so that it didn't use the direct code. Can you share some funny stories of working with Blizzard, whether with the devs or more iconic Blizzard personalities like Metzen and Samwise? Actually, the most interesting story about my time at Blizzard and probably one of my happiest memories was that me, Derek Simmons, Jason Hutchins, Mark Downey, Samwise Didier, and Chris Metzen would play Dungeons & Dragons together. Derek Simmons would be the dungeon master. He made his own system called Avarice, which I don't know if he shipped it. I don't think he's ever put it out there. I wish he would. Derek, if you're watching, I'll help you ship Avarice. It's time to unleash your stuff on the world. So we would play Dungeons & Dragons together, and we would go on many adventures, and I found this old document. So this is actually Jason Hutchins', you can see there, character sheet. He played the Templar Aureus, and this is a wanted poster put out by I forget what the organization was called, but Prime. I was like an illegal magic user. I was Kellen the Drow. And there's some little interesting anecdotes here. This was drawn by Samwise Didier. Samwise played Mughel, the Hobgoblin. Moogle, we called him Moogle. And then Saradwin was Mark Downey's character. Arius was Jason Hutchins' character. And we would go on adventures together. Chris Metzen wasn't in the initial part of the campaign. He joined in the second campaign. as Agranor the Half-Ogre. Unfortunately, I don't think Sam did art for him, but I think that Chris did his own art. I just don't have it. Jarvis the Panda is a NPC character. He was amusing. Played by Derek Simmons, I suppose you would say. But Derek ran the campaign. So there you go. I think that's a pretty amusing anecdote. Did you play games against other developers at Blizzard very often? Did you challenge each other in group matches? We played Warcraft 3 matches and StarCraft matches all the time. It was pretty much a daily occurrence. It was sort of like you had to do a daily match anyways, just to help with the balance changes. And so we were always playing games against each other. And that's how we found some balance issues here and there. I remember on one particular occasion during the Frozen Throne, the Bat Riders, Troll Bat Riders, were problematic in a match. And it was, I think, Tom Cadwell's first foray into balancing, and Pardo had told him that when you initially balance a new unit, you want to balance it high, meaning that it's super good, so that people will use it more in matches. But I think that's something for release of a game, not necessarily for balance testing internally, but he did it anyways, and I remember distinctly typing and hitting return on the line, balance the Bat Riders hard. So that might give you some sense of that I might have been a little bit vitriolic during certain points in development, particularly when I was tired and we were doing balance changes. But towards the end of development, matches sort of went to the wayside because we were so busy making the campaign, so we couldn't participate in those. But like artists and programmers and stuff who were basically almost done at that point were more able to play matches, and so that's where most of the balance testing came from. In By Demons Be Driven, was it ever going to be a prerequisite to defeating Grom before being able to store him in the Pokeball? Don't you have to get him low? Let's look this up. So we're going to go into By Demons Be Driven. What triggers do we make for capturing Grom? So let's see if it's obvious to find or difficult. So if Grom dies, he instant revives. What is the victory condition? See, these questions are hard to answer sometimes. Disable for cinematic, Jaina AI stuff. Magic Vault. Oh, my Magic Vault. Oh. This never worked, did it? No, it didn't. The handy dandy magic box item. Okay, sorry. Now I'm off track. But yeah, I made this Magic Vault trigger that was supposed to like do random stuff, like give you null overseers, just totally random. Like, but I never sort of figured it out. If someone wants to mess with that, feel free. But that's not what we're here for. Right. You couldn't kill Grom. He would just instant revive. I don't think there ever was a phase where you didn't have to use the gem to capture him. So you can see from some certain triggers that maybe we were kind of stressed out during development and we're letting off steam by hiding things in the triggers. Probably do a whole series on stuff we hid in triggers. So you have to use the gem on him in the mission. Everything goes back to normal. It selects the units you had selected prior to. That's why we put all those units in the unit group at the start. That's actually one of those quality of life things that some people ignore. So set selected units equal units currently selected by player. So we know what you had selected when the cinematic started. And then we reselect them for you at the end. So it's like nothing happened. Subtle, but cool. Okay, no, I know why it works. In order to use the soul gem, it must have a target. And the only target for the soul gem is Grom. Let's verify. There you are. Item, Soul Theft. Traps the targeted enemy hero inside the soul gem when used. So because Grom was the only enemy hero on the map, the only one you could use the soul gem on was Grom. Well, I learned something. Did you guys learn something? No, it was not going to be a prerequisite. So, nope. That was never in the cards. It was always about capturing your friend, because it doesn't make sense to murder your friend before you save them. When you designed the culling, what were you told about Stratholme? Was it intended to be a landlocked city? Did you just design it from scratch and the lore was completely changed in WoW? Well, the culling. Literally nothing. No one told me anything about Stratholme. I didn't know anything. All I knew was it's a human city and it's a big city. Those were basically the two prime directives I was given. So, when I was designing the culling, I didn't know anything about the city, so I knew that we couldn't show like an entire city, So what I tried to do was give this grandiose sense of scope by having a pretty decent sized map and then just sort of carving out a section that breaks into the wilderness in the forest to sort of give the idea that this city is much, much, much larger than just this area. So this is like just one set of districts in what I try to give the impression is a much larger area, because all I really knew it was a big city. And then I tried to have like, you know, cool entranceway going into the first village area, a place to, I mean, this is so far off to the side that it's almost ridiculous, but like a city park. So I thought of it like a city. So a city would have a park, a city would have places to rest, a city would have bandits outside it, a city would have a graveyard. Did I put a graveyard somewhere? This was for the cinematic. So this is like a park area where people would go to sit and relax. So it's a very leisurely city. I guess I didn't have a graveyard. Well, I really should have. Maybe this was the graveyard. Maybe that's the insinuation. And I also had, most importantly, a zoo. Now, it's not the most interesting or compelling zoo, but I just thought it was funny to have these different creatures behind bars. And this is also where the infamous rat is. That looks like him. Filson the rat. And what was funny, like this little Easter egg here, it's just a modified rat. It's got the ability evasion 100%. So you can't attack it directly. And he drops a talisman of evasion, which I thought was pretty funny. So now you know, in the world of Lordaeron, rats have natural evasion, and if they happen to get their hands on a talisman of evasion, they will have 100% evasion. That is now lore that you have to keep in your head, because it's fact. I even did like aqueducts, yeah. Feeding in from like a major aqueduct. Yeah, I loved waterfalls. And then here's the central point, which never got used as a central point because basically you would destroy all this and then you would go down here and destroy all this. I don't know. Some people might have explored more. I don't really have a good sense of how people played this map, to be honest with you. I think this is one of my early iterations in level design where level flow, I let the level flow get away from me. All these areas are connected through this central point, and you can find all these different things. So I think it still worked. It's still a good map. It's just not non-optimal. Like what's this? What is this? Just an empty grain boxes around a water well, implying that it was poisoned. Like, this is so far off to the side. What's even the point? I don't know. It's desperation houses in case Mal'Ganis goes over there. Did I answer the question? Yeah. I was told almost nothing. What are your thoughts on the balance of racial units? Do you think any particular race is imbalanced? Yes. So, orcs. So here's the thing. In a game where a unit deals full damage, no matter how much damage it has taken, the unit that survives the longest is dealing more of its damage the entire time. And that's just sort of a fundamental part of the game. So if a unit can be killed easily, like in say 1 or 2 shots, it's not dealing its damage anymore, so it's gone. And so any race that has more hit points as sort of like a base element of that, it's more difficult to balance just because it's easier to keep something with that many hit points alive. And, you know, when it gets healed, it benefits more from heals and everything like that. So I'm not saying that it's totally imbalanced. Certainly there were measures taken to keep them in balance, but I just think orcs have a natural advantage in a game like this because they naturally stay alive longer and thus deal their damage longer. And in a game where experience matters so much from other heroes killing your units, being able to keep your units alive just because they have so much more hit points means that you're denying experience that as well. So it's just there's multiple advantages that the orcs have just based on their natural stats. That might be a controversial take, but that's my personal opinion on it.
When you placed Easter eggs in the game, were they placed on a whim or planned out when you drafted out the mission? 90%, maybe 98% of all the Easter eggs in the game are 100% on a whim. Yeah, it's basically like, oh, I've got a little extra space over here. It'd be cool if there was an Easter egg here. Or in some cases, I had like
large paths of open space because my level design was kind of terrible. And I'm like, I need to fill this in with something. So I came up with some sort of gimmick or like a new race to meet or a Pandaren relaxation pool, though that has a longer story, which we'll get to in a bit. The only planned Easter egg was for the Frozen Throne and the Dungeons of Dalaran. We definitely planned to have the tower defense mission, and that was an Easter egg. So that was the only planned Easter egg in all of Reign of Chaos and the Frozen Throne, in terms of like, it was something we knew was going to go into the game. Every other Easter egg in the game is the personal whim of whatever level designer was making that mission. So here is the only planned Easter egg in all of Warcraft 3 and Warcraft 3 The Frozen Throne. The RGB sheep. Or actually it's red, yellow, blue, isn't it? That doesn't look green. That should have been green. Oh well. This is the puzzle you have to figure out in order to get to the tower defense map. Some of this was almost cut because it was a little too off the wall for certain individuals, but I'm glad that we kept it in as it is. And this is one of my more elaborate levels, as you might be able to tell from the triggers. I've literally named the trigger and the folder it's in Balram EU, which is the solution to the puzzle. Spoilers. So each one individually plays its sound, and then over here, okay, this is a complicated trigger. This is when I was getting fancy. Oh, look at this. There's a Easter egg that was disabled involving Timmy. I don't remember this. There's supposed to be a small Timmy that followed you around. This I never got working. I vaguely remember it. Do you agree that Warcraft 3 is a good game because everyone on the dev team knew what would be coming next? What would be coming next? Do you think that developing the game by looking at the bigger picture in terms of lore, characters, locations, items, etc. helped make it the masterpiece as we know it today, not Reforged? So, no. Not at all. Warcraft 3 was a good game because we wanted to make it a good game and we worked very hard to make it a good game. All of the lore and everything, the characters, the locations, those are all strictly for Warcraft 3. World of Warcraft's lore was not set. It was a game in production. Metzen wasn't even working on it really yet. At the time of Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos, and the Frozen Thrones production cycle. So World of Warcraft, or anything that came after Warcraft 3, literally they had nothing to do with what we did on Warcraft 3. We didn't try like, oh wow, because WoW is going to exist, we're going to make Warcraft 3 even better. And just no, of course not. No, we wanted to make Warcraft 3 a good game because we wanted to make a good game. Every single one of us wanted to make a good game. And so we put our hearts and souls into it, and you know, it is what it is, whether you love it or hate it. What are your thoughts about the world editor and the custom-made maps in general? I have many thoughts. Many thoughts. In terms of the custom maps that people make, I mean, a lot of them are, you know, wacky. But Dota exists because we made a robust world editor for Warcraft 3, and the entire intent of that was to make sure that the players at home could make something exactly like Warcraft 3, because we wanted to encourage the next generation of developers by providing a tool that allowed you to do exactly what we did. Like literally it's one-to-one what we had, minus some features because the world editor was in progress while we were making Reign of Chaos. We wanted to make sure that that was A, easy to use, and B, something that you guys got and could do whatever you wanted with. And I think we were largely successful in that, given that we spawned entire genres. Did you and the other developers expect the modding community of Warcraft 3 to be so big? No. Was the world editor designed with that flexibility in mind? The world editor was designed to be a friendly as possible end user experience for anyone who wanted to make a map like we did, or to make their own campaign, or to just be creative in their own way. That was the whole point of the world editor, and we were very committed to that. We had no expectations of the modding community. Honestly, we thought it would be a lot of like garbage maps, and you know, for the large part, there's a lot of garbage maps. You know what I mean? Like rape defense. Like who did that? Like, I hope it was like a kid who just didn't understand what he was doing. But you know, what? Why would you do that? We didn't expect the community that was built from the Warcraft 3 modding community, but we were happy that it happened, and it was our intent that anyone would be able to become a level designer like us. And so I'm glad that a lot of people did. That's maybe a crowning achievement in my career, that I was part of that. What is your opinion about trying to remake or enhance current Warcraft 3 campaigns by fans? So to take our current campaigns and to remake them and enhance them? Great, do it. I love it. fix my maps. There's some funky triggers that probably could be redone. Like my trigger logic is not always the best, but it helps me think logically, which is great. We absolutely love it when people take what we worked on and build on it. That's kind of what we wanted, though. I think it's because of the CD space concerns. Those campaign missions are locked behind some sort of MPQ, which was not the best. I think it would have been better if they'd been just available to mess with. But oh well. On the other hand, maybe we locked them because, you know, the content of the triggers in the world editor were not filtered. So if we put cuss words and stuff in there, that would be exposed by people opening them in the world editor. Maybe that was part of the concern. But either way, I wish we had just simply made it more transparent and allowed people to edit those maps from the very start and like see how the culling of Stratholme was made, and maybe someone gets interested in coding because they see that, you know, Mike Morheim did some code with the triggers. I think that would have been great. What took more time, programming the world editor or developing the campaigns with it? The campaigns. The campaigns took more time. So the map editor was designed by, or programmed by, and partially designed by Brett Wood, who was an actual rocket scientist, and in tandem with the level design team who wanted to, you know, have a functional world editor that they understood how to use. I think Mike Heiberg was primarily leading that design. World editor was mostly done long before we shipped, and then there was just like bug fixing and stuff that would come up periodically. So yeah, campaigns, they took the longest. Are there any hard-coded Easter eggs in the game's maps? For example, ones that can't be found in the game, just in the maps files. In terms of like Easter eggs hidden in the game's maps that are not in the game, like you can't find them by playing, yeah, there's like tons, but most of them are disabled and you'd have to open up the world editor to find them. I showed one earlier that concerned the sheep following a little Timmy around. So it was after you unlocked the Easter egg to get the tower defense level, I was going to have the 3 sheep unlocked from their cages and follow you around, but I couldn't get them to follow the player around, so I tried to create an invisible unit called that I named Little Timmy that would have been invisible, that they would follow around, and it didn't work out. There was too many sharp corners and stuff, and the sheep would get caught on stuff. It just never worked. So that's one, for example. And I only know that one because I just looked through the editor and saw that earlier. There's hard-coded trigger map stuff that is not in the final game, like you can't find it. Which dev came up with the first Pandaren Easter egg? That would be me. So the reason that I put the Pandaren relaxation pool in Reign of Chaos is because Sam Didier had made this cool piece of art and we put it into the game and then there was no use for it. So I made a use for it. I was like, we'll have a Pandaren relaxation pool and I'll put it over here in the corner of Undead 2. And poof, that was our first Pandaren Easter egg. Then you might be familiar with this guy over here, the largest panda ever. Tim put this in, maybe inspired by the Pandaren Easter egg. So we just had a thing for pandas after that. And I believe there's one more, but I can't think of what it is. But I actually did Tim's maps were crazy, holy moly. I actually did one scene on this map, and I believe it's the giant panda one. Scene, blue flame traps. No, that's disabled. Here's another one. There were some blue flame animations that didn't work out. I don't know if that's an Easter egg though on this. So if I can find it, Panda Cinematic, Dave, come on. Set panda victim. Set panda victim equal entering unit. Add panda cinematic queue. Alright. Oh, so there's one unit that I set as the victim, so that gets moved to the front and shown so he can see the panda coming at him. And it could be any unit, so the cinematic could theoretically be different every time you play this mission, depending on who triggers it. Oh, geez. I went elaborate. So for each potential unit, they play a different sound. It could be Furion, it could be Tyrande, it could be a Druid, an Archer, a Hunter, or a Dryad. I really went all out on this. I must have been excited about the idea. So there you go. If you ever play Night Elf 05 and you come around this corner, know that whichever unit triggers this region will be the victim unit and will have a little sound that they play at the end. So yeah, It was me who came up with the first Pandaren Easter egg, and that tradition was carried by Tim, and I think maybe one other, but I'm not sure how many Panda Easter eggs there are in total. Were you bugged when the names of models had to be changed due to litigation and copyright issues? No, didn't bother me at all. There's just this thing when copyright issues come up, you gotta be very careful. You don't want Wizards of the Coast or, the Tolkien estate suing you for using the same names as stuff that they have in their lore. So it didn't bother me at all. I thought it was cool that it sort of made things more unique for the Warcraft franchise. There's not really anything that we could consider like standard lore at that time. I'm not sure what the Tolkien estate has done with their stuff yet, but a lot of Tolkien stuff was based off of fairy tales and things like that. So only a certain amount of that can be copyrighted anyways. But it didn't bother me. It was just, for me, I consider it creating new stuff that's specific to our game, which I thought was cool. Now, here's a question I didn't like, but I put it on here. I have a little rant for you. Who was the cutest dev on the dev team, and what is her phone number? So there's two things I need to address here. Number one is the general attitude. Just because a woman is working on a game doesn't mean that she wants to date you. I'm not going to give you anyone's phone number regardless of the situation in this regard. No one would ask that of me, like, oh, Dave was handsome and he worked on Warcraft 3. I want his phone number. Actually, there might be a couple people who are like that, but no one has ever asked me this sort of thing before. So I just want to say that it's difficult enough being a game developer, but to add on top of that, this sort of sexualization or dateability thing for women, just makes it so much harder for them. And here's the second part of this rant. A fun fact for you. There were literally 0 women on the game development team on Team 1, except there was 1 woman in the audio department, which was a separate department downstairs. In terms of there's no women on the level design team, game design, there was no artist, no female artists, literally no women on the Warcraft 3 team at all, except for in HR and the 1 woman in the audio department, who I shall not name because of stuff like this. So I just want to sort of expose that attitude as something that should be avoided. Don't sexualize developers, even if it's being done to men. That leads down a dark path too, as the Cosby Suite allegations might have shown. So I just wanted a moment of seriousness there as we begin the political questions that I've picked out for the second half of this. In your opinion, what was unique to Blizzard that allowed it to produce major success after major success from 1995 to 2005? It was that Blizzard was founded on the principles of we all love games and we want to hire people who love games and we want to make great games. That's it. One of the first questions I was asked in the interview was basically what games do you like? What do you like to play? Everyone's asked that. Everyone from programming to reception were asked, what games do you like to play? And if you weren't really a gamer, then you didn't have a place at Blizzard. That was just a fact, because the whole principle of what Blizzard was founded on was we want people who love games. I don't know that they've maintained that. I'm suspicious that things have changed since I left, but I can't speak to that one way or the other. Did Mike, Pat, and Jeff leaving to form ArenaNet have a big impact direction on the War 3 project? Yeah, it resolved the conflict between Mike O'Brien and Rob Pardo. Rob Pardo wanted a more RTS-focused game, Mike O'Brien wanted a more RPG-focused game. And Mike leaving to found ArenaNet and to make Guild Wars 1 and 2, which are amazing games that you should play. By the way, Guild Wars 2 has one of my favorite Easter eggs in games of all time, but I'll talk about that another time. It did have a huge impact on how War 3 ended up being, which is to say that it shifted more towards the RTS aspects. Are you still working for Blizzard? No, I'm not working for Blizzard. I'm not. Why did you leave Blizzard? So this is a hard one to answer. The diplomatic thing to say would be that I got tired of the Warcraft franchise and left, but while that might be true in some regards, the truth is that I was ousted from Blizzard by Rob Pardo and Jeffrey Kaplan. Basically, I was working on World of Warcraft on the quest design, and Jeffrey Kaplan would complain to Rob Pardo saying that I wasn't meeting some standard or something like that, which was obviously bullshit. So then Rob Pardo would come to me and say, hey, I heard that you're not, doing your work. And then I would go back to Jeffrey Kaplan and go, hey, what's wrong? What are you expecting? What are your expectations? What do I need to do? And then he would lie and say, oh, I love everything you're doing. It's great to have a good writer on the team. I really like what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And so it was just this endless loop of bullshit. But on top of that, there was an incident with me and Pardo that I don't really like talking about, though I've talked about it a bit several times now. But basically, he harassed me in a very uncomfortable way at the Blizzard 10-year anniversary party. And as a result of that, he started collecting negative information about me from various people at the studio. And there was like a come to Jesus kind of thing where he listed all the negative things that I'd ever done at the company. And they basically said, this is your chance to, turn this around, if you fix these things, then, there's not a problem. So what I did was I talked to every person that I had ever wronged there, and I sort of tried to resolve my issues with them. And these were pretty minor things, honestly. Like, in retrospect, looking back at my career, these were like just minor disputes about like how a sound should be implemented and whatever. They were not a big deal. So they actually were very easy to resolve. And it became apparent to me that the reason that this list had been made was to create a list of things in order to justify me being fired. And ultimately, Pardo did get me fired. And it didn't matter what I did after that point. Even though I made the effort and improved and talked to everyone and sort of had a better understanding of how the things that I tell people can impact them, which helps me. It helped me in my career later, and certainly made me a better person to work with. I'll say that. So in that regard, I guess I have Blizzard to thank for that. But at the time, it was a traumatizing incident, and being fired from Blizzard was the worst thing that had ever happened to me at that point in my life, because Blizzard was my life. It had been the last 5 years of my life. Working on Warcraft 3 and the Frozen Throne, starting in QA. This was my second job at all. My first job in the game industry. Starting in QA, working my way all the way up to campaign design and working on Warcraft 3 and the Frozen Throne. And I thought, as a quest designer on World of Warcraft, which I was pretty happy about. It's crushing. It's crushing to be fired from a job like that. But thanks to that, I've had quite an illustrious career thereafter, including working on many really cool franchises like Silent Hill and The Oddworld. Stranger's Wrath was an amazing game. Wasteland 3 was really fun, and I've now built a huge 23-year spanning career with tons of games and having worked on all these different genres and in all these, like, from console to mobile to whatever. That wouldn't have happened if I'd stayed at Blizzard. If I'd stayed at Blizzard, I'd have been working on World of Warcraft for another 5 to 10 years, maybe to this very day, who knows. And so I think regardless of how it hurt at the time, I think it taught me a lot of valuable lessons about what I'm looking for in a game studio, the kind of people that I want to work with, and how I should treat other people, and gave me a background that opened a lot of doors for me in the game industry and allowed me to move to much better places. And now I'm basically independent and able to work on multiple things at the same time. And I think that's a good position for me to be in, because I get pretty bored easily with just one thing. So I need to have that variety in my life to keep me moving from project to project. That was an elaborate answer. How did you end up being brought into Warcraft 3 Reforged development? Did you reach out to Blizzard, or did they reach out to you? I was reached out to. A friend who is still at Blizzard to this day sent me an email asking if I would be interested in working on something based on the Warcraft 3 engine. And of course I said yes. Now, this is a long story as well. It took months to get to a final negotiation point just to get a contract. And ultimately, we started on it, and we actually produced documents, and I got my first and last payment from them for that project just before the 800 layoffs. So there was a 500 layoffs earlier, like around 2016, 2007, I want to say. And there was, in 2019, was it? I think there was another 800 layoffs by Activision Blizzard. And after those layoffs, I got ghosted. They stopped talking to me. And I still had one more document that I needed to deliver to sort of fulfill the contract. And so I was waiting. I just left it open. They'd already paid me. So I just left it open saying if they would come to collect that document. And they never did. And later we find out that they had dramatically slashed the budget for Warcraft 3 Reforged to almost nothing. And now that that's all public information, thanks to Jason Schreier's reporting, you know, I feel much more comfortable being open and honest about just how much they screwed Warcraft 3 Reforged. And it's pretty clear to me that it came from the top. Maybe even Kotick directly. I'm not 100% sure. But it was a monetary thing. They screwed the game that we all wanted to see for money because they thought there was no money in this. And they proved themselves right because they effed the product and now no one wants it. So, sad. When you were working on Reforged, apparently you were brought in later in development. Was it clear when you arrived that it was already screwed? It wasn't screwed when I started. When I started on Warcraft 3 Reforged, it was going really well. It was actually going to be quite impressive. So I got reached out to. So we've got one original campaign designer plus the two who are already at Blizzard. Maybe they didn't have time for this and that's why I was summoned. Not sure. But I brought in Tim Campbell as well, who was one of the best campaign designers for Warcraft 3 and the Frozen Throne. So it would have been amazing if they hadn't cut the budget and basically stopped talking to us. And when I say they ghosted us and they stopped talking to us, I mean they totally ghosted us. Not even an email saying, oops, sorry, it didn't work out, budget got cut. Nothing. Not a word. And this was from a friend, so it kind of hurt in an extra special way. But it wasn't screwed when I started. It did not become abundantly clear that Reforged had been hosed until basically it shipped. Because I still had hope that maybe they'd restricted the budget and they were just focusing on the core game and making those cinematics work and stuff. But they didn't even do that. In fact, there was only one campaign designer for all of Reforged. That's nuts. We're talking about a campaign that took like 9 people 2 years to create for just Reign of Chaos, and they're gonna redo all those maps with new cinematics and everything with one guy? Impossible. So that's just how badly the budget got hosed. But you know what? That's because Blizzard is dead, and now it's just Activision's sock puppet. It was said you were briefly brought on. What made you leave and not stay longer on the project? They ghosted me, so I've already answered that. What do you think the future holds for Blizzard? Is its ship sinking, or has the sun not yet set on the Blizzard Empire? Well, Blizzard is dead. It is a corpse. It is a corpse being puppeteered by Activision, and it's going to be used as basically a factory to put the Blizzard stamp on things and stoke nostalgia to get sales. And that's it. That's it. So stop holding out hope that Blizzard is going to come back. Everyone who founded Blizzard, all the principles that Blizzard was founded on, they're gone or they're dead. No one died. Sorry, the principles are dead. No one died. Principles that Blizzard was founded upon are dead. They've been desecrated and are destroyed. So let Blizzard go. That's my main message, is let Blizzard go. Appreciate what was created back when it was done, and stop holding out hope that it's going to come back, because it's not. Can crunch time be avoided completely, or regardless of the software development cycle used, game development will have at least some overtime work? Crunch time can be avoided completely. 100%. I've worked at studios where they didn't have any crunch time, where it was like mandatory that people go home at a certain hour. This is mostly in Europe, but it depends on the studio. What crunch time is indicative of is poor planning. If your game has crunch time all the time, you need a better producer. You need a better project manager. They're effing up. That is quite frankly the job of the producers and the project manager, depending upon how the studios run. And when you start running into overtime all the time, or there's like crunch on every project towards the end, I know it's avoidable. I've seen it done, and all it really requires is better planning And I think that's something that plagued the industry early on, but is no longer necessary in order to function. So when I hear about like BioWare's Magic Time and that kind of garbage, they just have someone in charge who's bad at planning, and they need to fix that. Pure and simple. If you could give prospective game designers one tip, what would you say to them? You know, I made this whole YouTube channel to give tips to game designers on how they could improve. If you haven't seen my Game Design 101 video, please go check it out. It's a very easy to understand introduction to game design and how it works and what the main goals are, and some terminology that will help you when discussing game design with other people. I'm quite proud of that series. I started developing it when I was in China, and I had to mentor new game designers in China. China doesn't really have game design as a discipline. They basically have a dictator who tells the programmers what to do, and it's not really a good system. So I'm hoping to help internationally develop better game designers, and I'm hoping that that will sort of be a legacy that I can leave behind, is to give the next generation a leg up on game design, because there's no real game design schools. There are schools that claim to have game design degrees, but they tend to be focused on programming, and I think game design as a discipline is a little bit further behind. And it's also one of those disciplines, much like writing, where everyone thinks they can do it because they have ideas. But having ideas and doing good game design or doing creative writing are not the same thing. The idea is not the point, the execution is. And game design is about the execution of those ideas. So my one amazing tip to improve your game design, it's to play games and understand why you like them or why you don't like them. In my Game Design 101 series, this is one of my major tips. Basically, people play games all the time and they go, yeah, I really like that game. But have you ever really thought about why and really analyzed what made that game fun for you? And the thing is, what you'll discover is that the things that make games fun for you are not necessarily what makes games fun in general. And so you have to be able to discern the difference between why you like a game and why someone else may like a game, or why you hate a game and someone else may like that same game. Once you have a deep understanding of that, the game design comes very easily, and you start making better and better decisions. So that's my one tip. Please check out my game design series if you're interested in learning more about game design. What was the process of your work on the Warcraft 3 missions from start to finish? What parts of the work did you have a say over, and which were out of your control? I think I went over this a little bit in the first one, but this question asks for more details on that. So the way that it worked, Chris Metzen would write the story, and he would write basically a mission outline almost, where he would give the beginning and sort of the end state of what the mission would be because of the nature of the writing, and he would give you some idea of what should go on in the mission. But that being said, once we got that script, we would all do a round table and we would read the script together as a level design team, and if anything seemed weird or out of place, we would basically give some feedback to Chris, but otherwise one of us would claim dibs on the mission if it spoke to them, as it was with the calling, and then we would do the mission, and we could do whatever we wanted at that point. You would open up the editor and just do your thing. But yeah, it would start like this, where you're just putting textures down and building out a level. Now granted, early on, we didn't have all of the tools available that we did later on, but really it didn't change that much from beginning to end in terms of how we approach these missions. Now each individual level designer had their own creative process. I can tell you that my process was basically I would start with an outline of what I wanted to do, and I would start laying out the map that way. So I'd do some rough outlining of where I wanted things in the mission. Actually, I usually started with the cliffs. I had a big thing where I wanted things to go up or down. I don't remember how to do anything anymore. That's the sad truth. It's been such a long time that I can't remember the way that I used to work. I know there's a way to make this little square a little bit bigger, but I can't think of it now. Now I'm just messing around. But this is actually a good preview for what I intend to do next, which I'll get to later. In By Demons Be Driven, there's an unused trigger for a gambling mechanic. What was it intended for? Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Let's open that up. Triggers. Magic Vault. It's got to be this. The Magic Vault is a vault, which it looks like a box. I think they made the Magic Vault for Dalaran, and when I saw it, I was like, oh, it would be cool if it would drop like random items. There it is. So this unit here, which can drop items from a custom item table, you just create a set and give a % chance. We didn't have that. So at some point, that's why I was doing this. But then we got that, and so this was obsolete. But my purpose in creating this then became, well, what if I had this in a trigger set and then anyone could just copy and paste the trigger into their map? So that was the idea, is that I would make one sort of randomizer for all items that you could drop in any map, and then you didn't have to think about it, and you could just... Everything's completely random, which might be nice in some situations, but probably not for campaign missions. So ultimately, it just wasn't something that was terribly useful, and I had kind of wasted my time. All it does is it sets this integer randomizer between 1 and 20, and then the weight is there because I couldn't get it working, and I was told that it might need a weight. So that's, sometimes you would safety triggers with weights like that so that the game could catch up. But it does poll every 0.1 seconds, so that's why you would wait 0.1 seconds. So it's just a random number between 1 and 20, and then it drops one of these things. I don't even know if this works, to be honest with you. But yeah, the event in condition is kind of a wonky way to do it, and so obviously just creating a table set on it is better. And ultimately, I think it led to this, but I'm not 100% sure. So there you go. That's what it was for. A lot of people think King Arthas is one of the hardest missions. Do you agree, and why? Let's go look at that mission. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I know why people thought this was hard. So the goal of this mission was to do a stealth mission with a character who doesn't do stealth. So you had to pick and choose your fights very carefully. That was sort of the goal. So the reason people might think it's the hardest mission is because if you just like try to ramrod your way through, you're going to get smoked, because there's like all sorts of triggers in here where characters will fall back to other units and warn them. So the villagers would run to guards, and then the guards would come running. So if you play the mission like you would a normal melee map where you just throw your units at stuff, yeah, you get crushed. Like if you try to go through this main gate, you're basically asking to die. And this entrance, I admit, is not very easy to spot. In fact, if I were to redo this mission right now, I would do something like this, because there's no reason to overly hide this kind of thing. There's ways to draw your eye over here. Remember, with the black mask on, you're not going to necessarily see that. I tried to do certain tricks, like this is up on a hill and that goes down there. Assuming that I even did this, I think I might have taken over this level from someone, from Tim maybe. But anyways, the point being that this right here is probably what screws it up. Because once you lose one unit, the rest of this becomes quite difficult, especially if you miss the graveyard, though it's literally right on the direct path, so I don't know how people would miss that, but it's possible to miss it. But yeah, right here, I imagine a lot of people died. Like if we had Valve-style playthroughs where we would get feedback and could see the data from playthroughs, I'm 90% sure there would be like a bunch of players who died right here, and the mission becomes unplayable to them because all this gets aggroed. 3 knights, 4 footmen, 2 footmen in the front, and you have 2 ghouls and 1 Arthas, who is level 1, I believe. You're dead. So that's what I imagine. There's a lot of cool stuff on this map that people probably didn't notice. Like there's a Fight Club reference over here. His name's Tyler. His name's Robert. Tyler Durden. Robert Polson. Those are references to Fight Club. I think I answered that. So do I agree that it's the hardest mission? No, it's not the hardest mission. It's only the hardest mission if you wait, is this King Arthas? This isn't King Arthas, is it? Oh, it's not King Arthas. Okay, this is from the Frozen. So it's King Arthas is in the Frozen Throne campaign. Let's open that one up. I'm going to have a totally different take. This is King Arthas. Oh yeah, I know this map now. So, is this the hardest mission in the game? No. The reason people would think this one's the hardest mission is because I've divided your forces across 3 areas of the map. And so the primary goal of the mission is to stop the villagers from escaping. So you're slaughtering all the villagers before they can get out of here, and you've got to cover 3 different areas, 3 different paths. Up here with Kel'Thuzad, down here with Sylvanas, and over here with Arthas. And the problem, you're dividing your attention between 3 different areas, and so that gets confusing for people. It's like, I gotta build over here, I gotta build over there, I gotta make more troops over here. One of the keys to this mission, though, is that you can sort of incur your way into this area. I mean, once you've choked them off here, like they're not getting path. You can literally block this with abominations. This path less so. It's more difficult, and especially because they can come from the top and the bottom here towards Kel'Thuzad. And then down here, it's primarily you need to have enough banshees to take over any knights who come your way, because the knights are the biggest problem for the bottom right. But one sort of cheat is if you can get an abomination to the top right and to the bottom right. The abomination cloud will poison everything and makes things a little bit easier. And so mixing troops helps a little bit. But the reason that people lose this mission a lot is not because it's particularly difficult. It's because there's 2 types of troops. Troops that attack and troops that just walk past. And so people focus on the troops that attack, and their units get distracted and start chasing the guys who attack and are fighting with them, and so the villagers just walk past, and so you don't even notice when one gets through. So it's very important that the first thing you do whenever like a group comes into one of the 3 areas is to murder the villagers. And one of the things that helps with that is if you move up your choke over here on the bottom, after destroying this, of course, that helps you a lot in making sure that you have a little bit of extra time to kill any villagers before they pass. And same down here is like, as soon as troops approach this one, use the banshees, take over the knights, and then you have an army of knights that can run down the villagers really, really quick. And then up here, it's a little bit more difficult, but Kel'Thuzad is the key because he can slow things with his AoE. I understand why people think it's the diverted attention. You're paying attention to 3 different areas. You have to do building with 3 different areas. And so one of the hot tips, if you're stuck on this mission for whatever reason, is to hotkey your buildings. If you put this and this on a hotkey, put it on 0, 9, and then I would have this one down here on 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. And then just whenever you've got money, just hit 0, build whatever, 9, build whatever, 8, build whatever, 7, build whatever, and so forth. And that allows you to focus on whatever mess you're dealing with in terms of fighting while being able to build simultaneously. And that's where most people kind of lose it, is they can't build at the same time as they're fighting, because you're fighting a lot on this map, either trying to progress or trying to stop the villagers from getting through. So yeah, I understand why people thought it was hard, but you know what? It's not that hard. You just have to focus and not let the villagers get through. That's all. And I give you plenty of opportunities for them. Don't you get like 20 that can get through before you even lose? How many are allowed through? That's what I want to know. Here's victory, defeat, villagers escape. 20, yeah. You got 20 chances. How are you? Come on. Hardest mission. Next question. What's your favorite cinematic from Warcraft 3? What's your least favorite? I mean, I'm sure everyone has the same answers. My favorite cinematic for Warcraft 3 is Arthas coming home and murdering his father. Like, how can you not like that? That's sort of the apex of the entire story, is that Arthas has come home and the unexpected happens. I mean, it's expected if you're paying attention, but... And my least favorite cinematic is the end cinematic, unfortunately. The one where the Night Elf sperm invade the pores of Archimonde. Just such a dumb cinematic. Like, that's just a terrible ending. So... I'm sure most people have the same answer. Have you kept up with the Warcraft lore or not really? You know, I hadn't at all. I think World of Warcraft Classic was the last time I sort of had any inkling of what was going on at all. I have had an unfortunate revitalization of interest in it, and I've sort of looked at what's going on with the Shadowlands and so forth, and I'm just not interested. These stories are not terribly interesting to me anymore. Why was Reforged so disappointing? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? What did they promise and what did they deliver? Let's look at the promised features for Warcraft 3 Reforged. I mean, like you can read article after article about everything they promised and what they didn't do. Clan system, player profiles, ranking ladders, automatic tournaments, and the possibility to play on our own maps for solo player and campaigns were removed from the game. So, it wasn't just that they broke promises. It was supposed to have completely redone cinematics and all this stuff with like full-on animations. Like they had completely redone the culling in that was like sort of their selling point, was like, look, we made the culling even cooler, and then they didn't. They just flat out didn't do it. And that was all the surface stuff that they had promised. They had actually promised in trailers and things like that. They just didn't deliver. I thought they were going to redo all the cinematics, the out-of-game cinematics too. I don't think they did that either. Let's not relive this again. It's making me sad. But it's even sadder than that because of all the things that were planned. And again, I have to point out that Bobby Kotick would not fund this. He didn't want this to happen, because he didn't think there was enough money to be made from it. And you can't argue with it in terms of a profit motive. It's hard to say what would have happened if this had actually happened in full. There certainly wouldn't have been as many returns, but ultimately it was simply they set an expectation and they didn't deliver. And that's why it was so disappointing. Nothing's more disappointing than being disappointed. So if they had just delivered what they had promised, it wouldn't have gone the way it did. It's just so much sadder because I personally know how much more that they were going to give beyond the expectations. Like they were going to over-deliver, and instead they under-delivered, which is like the exact opposite of Blizzard in terms of how they operated in the past, or at least when I was there. Among the Reforged missions, what is your opinion about the mission you worked on that were redesigned, such as the culling? Is there anything in these missions you wish it was available from the original mission? Yeah, I wanted the zoo. I thought the zoo should be in the culling. I understand why they changed it the way they did. I disagree with it. That's not how I would have done it. Because again, there we go. That's the culling. There's my baby. So I don't have the Reforged mission to do a side-by-side comparison, but I was missing the zoo. I know that supposedly Grank is still in there as a random from one of the houses, but I think that's kind of lame that you can't go find this secret. It's a random chance now. And I disagree with the way that they made the mission kind of smaller, whereas I was trying to give this vision of like a component of an epically large city. I don't know, maybe I got it wrong and Stratholme was supposed to be much smaller. I don't think so though. And you know what, from a level design perspective, it's not the best layout. I could have made this better, tighter, pulled this in, had some secrets over there or something like that. And overall, it's fine. It's fine what they did in Reforged. I don't hate it. I don't love it either. Who's your favorite hero from the game? In terms of the story or in terms of like to play? In terms of to play, like a gameplay dynamic, it's the Blade Master is my favorite because he has stealth and he can come out of nowhere and critically hit someone. So you get a bunch of cool opportunities to surprise attack, and he's got so many escape mechanisms. I think one of my favorite strats was like an early Blade Master and then just going into their peon line and destroying stuff, and then as soon as they come after me, I'll just go invisible and wait for them to go away, back to creeping or whatever, or maybe show up in their creep camp and like kill the monster with a critical hit just before they can. Definitely my favorite hero was the Blade Master. In terms of the campaign missions, it's from the Frozen Throne. Is it Maiev? It's the Warden. I want to say her name is Maiev, but I don't think that's right. The leader of the... Yeah, that's it, Maiev. So the reason that in the campaign missions I liked Maiev so much is because of her abilities. Blink, that's why. Because with Blink, you can do really cool secrets. All of the missions with Maiev have cool hidden secrets that you can only blink to, but I know I did one of them, and yeah, I put all sorts of crazy, cool little secret areas that you can blink to. The sad thing is I can't remember them all anymore because it was so long ago. Not a big fan of her vengeance ability, but it was fine, I guess. Sort of made her able to like go into areas all by herself and like handle stuff, which I guess was kind of the point of the character, being the Warden. So for playing Warcraft 3, like in multiplayer, Blade Master. For making missions, Maiev, because of Blink. What, in your opinion, is the most well-made mission in the game? The most well-made mission in the game? That's a tough question. I have thought about it a bit, but I don't really have an answer. I would say from a dungeon perspective, the Dungeons of Dalaran was the best mission made. And actually I'd say like overall the Dungeons of Dalaran was one of the best missions for both. Primarily because it's just got so many interesting things going on, and it's got the cool secret level. It's one of those missions where you can play it like 2 or 3 times in a row and discover new stuff each time. And I think those are the most interesting. And also you can change how you strategize it. Also, it has a bunch of like cool scenes that you come across, and that's always something that's really fun that makes the world feel alive. Is like when you come up this ramp, you see the humans holding off the undead incursion. So it's like there's all sorts of cool storytelling going on. And then there's the ghost mages and there's just it has the secret level in it. For me, having designed it, so I'm obviously biased. Oh, there's secret paths I even forgot about. Look, I put little doodads here to show you where to go. There's just so much in this mission. A lot of love went into it because I guess I knew it was like my last dungeon mission. So I was everything that I had thought of during Warcraft 3 that I couldn't get into that mission over there kind of went in here. And then the ending is kind of epic as well. And I pissed off a few people with it. And it has really good story beats too. Just so many good secrets. And the runes and the rune secrets. So good. Sorry, I'm gushing over my own mission. I'm just remembering all the stuff I put in here now. But it's one of the best missions in terms of like it has all these. It's got a magic vault. It just drops a 2-minute knowledge. It's got the indicators from the runes. It's got the secret areas that you can go in here and come out in a different area, and lots of opportunities to get reinforcements. It's got good visual storytelling. You can see the undead coming in from underground and attacking, and there's conflict, and it's just such a interesting kind of high level mission. And there's a lot of intrigue and mystery, and like, you know, who made these and who were these ghostly archmages, and it's just one of my favorites to remember. Is it the most well-made mission in the game? I don't know. It was the mission I had the most fun making, I would say. The culling was kind of a chore. At some point it became a chore because making your own AI, I just don't recommend that. It's rough. What is your least favorite mission in Warcraft 3? To have made, or just in general? I guess in general, the early missions are always kind of boring. And Tim Campbell had a good point that the first missions for the campaigns should be the last ones done, because you want to give the best impression. But when we're making the first missions, we just have no idea what we're doing at that point. So really, if you want to give a good impression, you want your first missions to be the last ones that you do, because then you know all the tricks and all the cool stuff that you can pull off, and then the first missions would shine. We didn't obviously do that because we got the script in a certain order, so those missions had to be worked on relatively early on. But in terms of my least favorite to work on, at some point the culling... When it came to debugging the culling of Stratholme, it got real bad. And that's why Mike Morheim had to basically come and do programming again. It's because my mission had so many bugs in it and they were so difficult to debug that I could no longer deal with it, which is just, sort of a bad scenario to be in. I wouldn't say it's my least favorite mission. It was just my least favorite mission to work on. In terms of least favorite mission, any mission where there was a countdown timer and you were defending something, those are my least favorite missions across the board. Because you can often hit this point where you're going to lose and there's nothing you can do about it, but you don't know it yet. So you continue play on for another 5-10 minutes, and then you're like, oh, wait, there's no way to win. Especially when the countdown timer is like over 30 minutes long. Never, ever do that. If WoW had not happened, what would have been the likeliest next step for Warcraft? Another expansion or a Warcraft 4? It would not have been another expansion. That's just not the Blizzard way. You do one expansion and then you're done. If there had been another expansion, it would have been from another studio, but who's going to do that? So I would say, I don't know. I think Hearthstone would have happened regardless of WoW. So that would have been the next Warcraft kind of thing. After that, would it have been a Warcraft 4? If Blizzard had not been bought by Activision, probably. But with Activision in control of Blizzard, there will never be a Warcraft 4. The only way there's ever a Warcraft 4 is if another studio makes a better RTS and everyone buys it, and it shows that there's like a way to make gobs of money, billions of dollars off of it. Then Activision would make a Warcraft 4. So I put the chances between 1 out of 1,000 and hell freezing over. So probably not. There'll probably never be a Warcraft 4. Next question. If you could replace any abilities in the game, what would they be? So I would replace any active passives, meaning any, like Tyrande, she has like is it a cold shot on her bow? that you can like toggle on and off, I would replace all of those within a more active ability, like a one-time frost arrow that like freezes them in place for a couple seconds and then has a cooldown, rather than like an auto on that uses mana. Like I hated all the passive abilities that were auto shots that used mana. They're not fun to use. It kind of diminishes the hero a bit, and they could easily be reworked into some sort of active ability. Yeah, any passive main ability I would rework into an active that you have to like think about and use in some fashion. What work did you do on WoW? Wow, what work did I do in World of Warcraft? I think the best thing to do here would be to show you my list of things I did. Work specifics, here we go. Okay, for World of Warcraft. See, I actually kept a detailed list. Actually, it looks like I haven't done anything. I haven't updated this. I started to update it for Wasteland 3 and I gave up. Anyways, on World of Warcraft, I did Whizbang Crank Toggle and the Buzzbox quests, Tok'ran Pathseeker, Kargal Battlescar and the Conscription quests, Sergra Darkthorn in her quest series, Darsok Swiftdagger and the Harpy quests, Ilyana and her quest series, which I think is in Ashenvale, Delgrin the Purifier, Battlefield Shadowstrike, and the Tower of Alphalax quests. I think most of those were destroyed. So yeah, those are the main quest lines I did. I think between them all there's like 30 some quests. But the most common one that people have actually experienced is the Sergra Darkthorn quests, where she's sending you around the crossroads to sort of learn the area. The interesting thing about that quest line, I don't even know if this link works anymore. Let's see. Oh, it does. Yeah. There's like 12 quests in this series. The interesting thing about Sergra Darkthorn is that when I first wrote these quests, she had different dialogue if you were a male or female character. If you were a female character, she would like praise you and talk about how great it is that you're in the Horde. And if you're a male character, she'd basically call you a lazy piece of shit. And that was done on purpose because I wanted to get people in the crossroads talking. So like people would be like, why is Sergra Darkthorn such a piece of crap? Why is she so mean to me? And then other people would be like, what do you mean? She's awesome to me. And the difference would be that if you were a female character, she would be praising you. And if you were a male character, she'd be talking trash. So yeah, that's just something I remembered. On the Whizbang Crank Toggle Buzzbox quests, the Buzzboxes were people's birthdays from the Warcraft 3 development team, but I think they changed them. I'm pretty sure that Kaplan changed them out of spite to remove them. But I'm not sure. Good times. What do you think about remasters, re-releases of games? Do they have merit above economic gain to a company? Yeah, I think a remaster isn't necessarily a bad concept. It's just that it has to be done in the right way. So the right way is simply either you just focus on it being an update, graphical content to catch it up. Like StarCraft is a great example of that. They did that flawlessly in my opinion. It was simply, we're just updating the graphics so that when you play in high resolution, it doesn't look like total trash. Like it was an 800 by 600 game. Like if you go back and you try to play it on like a modern monitor, like a 4K monitor, it just looks like utter garbage. And I always felt bad when I went to Korea to visit. I was watching StarCraft matches being played on TV because that's how prolific it is. It was there, maybe still is, and it just looked like trash because it was all pixelated and gross. So yeah, that's sort of like a perfect remaster example. The thing is, whatever you're doing with it, like if you're remastering something and re-releasing it, do something, make it clear what you're doing and then deliver on that. That's all you really have to do. Reforged didn't have to end up the way it did if they had just delivered what they promised, but they didn't. Let's not get into that. What do you think about MOBAs being invented indirectly through Warcraft 3? What made Dota so appealing? I think it's awesome. I think that War Edit as a creation tool for people was way ahead of its time. Like now we have things like Roblox and Godot, and there are entire studios being developed around the concept of providing tools to players to make their own stuff, like Core. I think most of them are failing to do a good job of providing tools that are easy enough to use. I think Warcraft did a really good job with the trigger editor, making it simple to sort of visually see how things are laid out and teach logic. To make a Roblox map, you literally need to learn Lua scripting. That's not very friendly at all. My daughter loves Roblox so much. I tried to get her interested in developing games with it, and you flat out have to learn Lua, and that's kind of tough. Though I did start her with like Code Academy and things like that, but those things get boring quickly because once you get the basic concept, it just gets repetitive, and you're like, what am I really doing? Because you're not learning applicable skills in those sort of training situations, or at least you don't understand that they're applicable skills yet. So Dota was appealing because RTSs are hard for most people. They like controlling units and like casting spells and stuff, and Warcraft 3 was bridging this gap between classic RTSs where you're massing units and sending them at the opponent and like trying to micromanage the individual units in a battle. And then we had this hero unit who had spells that he could cast. With Warcraft 3, you'll notice that the mana costs are very high and you have very low mana and it doesn't regen very quickly. So you're casting 1, 2, 3 spells and then your hero's kind of done unless you can find a mana potion or something. What made Dota so appealing was that it was like, yeah, it's the use of these abilities on this one hero unit that makes it so compelling. So you increase their mana pool and their mana regeneration, and so they're casting spells more often, and it's like, when do I use this ability in this combat to be most effective? And what made it compelling was that you're just controlling one unit now, but you've still got sort of the feeling of the action of the RTS in that one unit does so many things. It just was the first to sort of capitalize on that. The aspect of the RTS being sort of a 3/4 top-down kind of view and controlling a unit, clicking it around on a map, and using multiple abilities on that unit in the best way possible to defeat your opponent. It invented a new genre, and that's freaking amazing. That came from user-made maps. Why don't more studios make user-made maps? Well, they are now. That's what Roblox is. That's what Core is. That's what several studios are doing. But I don't think they're focusing on their tools the way they should be. How did you start your game development career? What was your first game you worked on and your memories of your early development experiences? I started in quality assurance. I do have an origin video for this to see how I got into it exactly, but I'll skip to being in QA. The first game I did quality assurance for was Diablo for the Macintosh. It was a lot of fun because back then it was like, play the game and find bugs. Quality assurance when I started was not as methodical as it is now, where there's a bunch of checklists and burn down sheets. And it was more about, can you do something creative enough to find a bug? And that was what I enjoyed because I found all sorts of crazy bugs that way. I think it was Joe Frayne who found the crotch bow. Basically, you could get it where the Amazon would shoot arrows out of her crotch as opposed to the bow, which we all thought was hilarious because we were all, 18, 19 years old. My early days in QA were great because you clocked in and clocked out, so there was no overtime or anything like that unless it was paid. But, I was making like $8 an hour, so it's not exactly like an amazing kind of pay. But then we would all go to lunch together and we'd talk about games, and it was, since everyone at Blizzard loved games, we all had this instant camaraderie, and it was just a really good time. And I really enjoyed the early years there. In terms of the first game I worked on in a non-QA role, it was StarCraft for the N64. I made the cooperative campaign mission, and I wrote the story for it, though there's some contention about who wrote that story now. The idea of Infested Stukov and a co-op campaign mission that primarily came from me as far as I recall. And I worked on that mission with Christian Arechi. He was really good at layout. So he did the layout of the areas, and then I did all the campaign triggers for the cooperative aspects, which were actually quite difficult because, first of all, you're using an N64 controller. I knew that they would be using it, so I had to sort of keep in mind what units I should give and how to keep it within certain constraints. But yeah, it was really fun. What is your proudest achievement in development? My proudest achievement? I guess it's all the people that I've reached. Like, I don't really take pride in any individual thing that I've done on any of my missions or any of the games I've worked on. For Oddworld Stranger's Wrath, there's a sniper character, and I created a script for how that sniper character works, where his first shot is it's like close, but it's going to miss. So it sort of alerts you that there's a sniper there, and then you can turn and fight with him. And then I put some triggers around him so that if you used a certain shot and he got knocked unconscious, he would one shot get flung out, and it would fling his money and stuff out too, to sort of safety it for the player. And I was really proud of that back then, because it's one of those things where I took into consideration how a player feels and what that experience is like when you're dealing with snipers, and I was proud of that in terms of like coming up with that. And it got other designers on Oddworld Stranger's Wrath saw what I had done with that, and they were like, oh yeah, I just took that and copied it because it was so good. So I was pretty proud of that. The person who told me that was Gautam Babar, who went on he's at Valve, so that was cool. I think the most humbling thing has been the number of people who have reached out to me now in light of like learning who I am and what I did and going, oh my God, Warcraft 3 and some of the missions that you did was what made me want to go into game development. That's so freaking cool. Like, what more could I hope to achieve than to sort of usher in a new generation of game developers and game designers who learned from my missions what they liked about games and creating their own. I inspired other people to create. That's amazing. So I couldn't be more proud of that. Yeah. Get choked up. What is your least proud moment in development? So my least proud moment in terms of like content that I created, it's usually the things that I don't have control over that make me unhappy. For example, I worked on the Da Vinci Code game for the PC, and I designed the majority of the puzzles. I designed a lot of the levels. I wrote almost the entirety of the script and most of the in-game dialogue, and all of that ruined because the owner of the studio decided that it had to have combat, which doesn't make any sense. It should have been a classic adventure game, and it could have been a really cool one with like some stealth elements and whatnot. And it just got ruined because some guy decided that Robert Langford had to fight cops. It's just stupid. It's so stupid. So I'm proud of my work on it. I am unhappy with the result. It's my lowest rated game, like it's 74 or something on Metacritic. And so it's sort of this combination of I'm proud of what I did, but damn, the end result was so crap because of one stupid decision. That's why it's so important to sort of know who you're working with. Like when you go to a new game studio, you want to make sure that you're working with people who are of like mind and aren't in a position of power to make really stupid decisions. So lately I've noticed that as soon as I find someone whom is in control and makes dumb decisions, I leave because I know what's going to happen. They're going to do something stupid and ruin what could have been good. That is the most disappointment I've ever had in my career, is when I do really good work and then it's ruined by one or two dumb decisions that are out of my control. Disregarding technological and economic limits, if you would have a chance to develop any game, what would you work on? You know, there aren't really any technological or economic limits stopping me from making whatever I really want to at this point. I think what's stopping me is that there are so many things that I want to do that I almost am relying on other people to direct my attention to what I should do. Because I want to make a cool RPG, I want to make a really cool detective game, I want to make a really cool open world exploration game. Like there's all these things that I want to do, but the truth of game development is that you need other people who also want to do the same thing. So I'm kind of looking for groups that I can go with and do the cool things that I want to do within the framework of them also wanting to do cool things in that same sort of setting or gameplay dynamic or whatever the case may be. And that's kind of why I'm involved in so many projects at once right now, though I think it's a few too many. When I was younger, I would have said flat out like a JRPG style RPG, like a full-blown story-driven RPG. I'm not sure that's true anymore. The thing I'm jonesing to make is like a tactics RPG, so I'm kind of hoping to get an opportunity to do that soon, and I think I found an opportunity for it, but we'll see. But yeah, because there's so many things I want to do, I kind of rely on finding the right people to work with on those ideas. And that's actually the most difficult part, is finding people who you have real synergy with. I hate using that word, but it's the only way to describe it. Finding that team that you can work really well with and build off of each other as opposed to like people tearing each other down. Where do you see RTSs like Warcraft 3 or StarCraft 2 in a few years? Well, I mean, War 3 and StarCraft 2 are going to be mainstays of the RTS genre for eternity. I don't think they're ever really going away at this point. Were there any core design principles or goals you had when designing each mission? Yeah, it's the basic core design principles of all game making, which is to think about the user experience. What is the player experiencing here? How can I show the player where to go, leading the player's eye, and like what interesting things would be happening here? What's going on in the game lore? What should be occurring in these situations? It's basically the whole user experience. And that's what I was focused on whenever I was designing a mission. What story am I telling? How do I tell that story to the player in a way that they understand it? And how do I turn that into an experience where they're experiencing the story rather than me telling them the story? Avoiding exposition, which a lot of games are really bad at these days. Yeah, the core design principle is always, what is the user experience and how can I improve it? What is your fondest memory of working on Warcraft 3? Does anything stand out that makes you nostalgic? Of the actual work? You know, the work itself kind of sucked. Let's be real. Like, these were grueling hours. There was at least 2 occasions where I spent the night there because I had to finish a mission before the next day so that it could be tested in time. That is not the right way to do things, because when you're operating on so little sleep, your brain stops functioning and you're just not coming up with good solutions. In terms of nostalgia for working at Blizzard, like, nothing comes to mind. Like, I don't have any nostalgia for that time period. I have nostalgia for the things I created, but the work environment, not a damn thing. The work environment was something I tolerated so that I could create cool stuff. Which is a terrible way to think about it, but I mean, that's basically what it was. When I run into a bad work environment now, I'm just like, see ya, I'm out. And so I say no to a lot of stuff that others might think me crazy for, but you know, my mental health and well-being is more important than working on the next killer game. And when they say killer game, they mean they would literally kill every freaking person working at the studio if it meant the game would be better, and they will try. Like, I'm watching you, CDPR. I know what you're about. I had an interview with Remedy that kind of put me off them recently, and you get a bunch of these studios, they get big, and they make cool games, and they make millions of dollars, and like, well, why wouldn't everyone want to work for us? We're so cool, so we can offer you lower wages, and we can offer you extended work hours for no extra pay, and get away with it. Screw that. I don't need to do that, and nobody should tolerate that. Nobody. I don't care if you want to be in games and you haven't gotten your opportunity yet. Don't accept it. Just don't. Walk out. Unionize. Strike. Because if you don't, you get abused. And no one should tolerate abuse. Ever. So yeah, my fondest memory of working on Warcraft 3 is actually seeing people experience joy as they play my missions. And hearing the stories of people having played Warcraft 3 and deciding to make game design a career. And like, those are the things that I fondly remember now. And these are new memories. And that's makes it even cooler. In terms of nostalgia, looking through the map editor, I have some nostalgia for the creation aspects of it and creating the missions and the tools that I had. But beyond that, not much.
How does the balancing process work in a competitive game like Warcraft 3? Do you try to balance the game based on opinions of professional players or win-lose statistics for specific matchups? Neither. Generally, the balancing for an original RTS, so in this case Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos, it's unit matches and numbers. So you'll create a spreadsheet that has all of the numbers of the units, their attack rates, their DPS, their hit points, and you'll do comparisons between them. And in that way, you'll have a spreadsheet that basically says, these guys are roughly equal to these guys. And then you can give them a power rating based on what their stats are. So for example, let's say that their hit points are valued higher than other stats, then hit point value times 1.2 would be their power rating. I'm not explaining this well. Let's make an Excel sheet. Alright, we're going to start from scratch here. And let's say that we have a unit name, hit points, DPS, and move speed. So you would have, let's say you have a Marine and you have a Zergling. Hit points of a Marine. I'm making these values up. Don't worry about it. Oh, right. Cost, DPS, move speed, attack type. There. Now you can see we've got a number of values here, and you can sort of do a comparative analysis of what these things will do against each other just in the spreadsheet alone. So now you want to calculate the power level. The power level is there. Let's use this. This is not a good example necessarily. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. DPS, let's say that has a very high value, a multiplier of 2. And let's say that hit points is super value. It has a value of 1.5. That has a point value of 75. Plus DPS value multiplied by 10, plus their speed. This one we're just saying it's equal to its value, whereas DPS is more important. And then we're going to parentheses all of this and subtract its cost. And then if it costs to, like, let's say gas or something like that, it would have even more calculations based on that. Anyways, this comes out to a power level of 50, and this one comes out to a value of 34.5, which makes the Zergling, based on the cost analysis, it makes the Marine much more valuable than the Zergling, which, yeah, I mean, you'd expect that. I'm not saying this was a good example. Don't use these numbers. But if you did StarCraft or any RTS, you would start with a sheet like this to sort of get an idea of what the power levels, the intrinsic power levels of things are. And let's say that hit points you decided were less valuable. You might take the hit points and now it's only 1.2, and then you would recalculate the formula across the board. And there you'd have a closer value between the two because you've devalued the hit points in terms of what they mean. I hope that gives you a basic idea, but basically you're determining the point value of each unit before you even do anything. That's the first layer. The second layer is that you then do testing in the game, where you just throw units at each other of equal values and see which one comes out ahead and whether these power levels work or not. And then you can adjust the power levels based on DPS is more valuable or DPS is less valuable, and things like that. So then you have these relative point values, and then you have the real testing of throwing the units at each other, and then all of that is for an RTS that's never released. You can bring in pro players, but like if you're bringing in StarCraft pro players to play Warcraft 3, you're really going to be able to judge that? They're seeing it for the first time? Not really. So you kind of have to release it and then see what happens. And then if things just seem overpowered, then you have to nerf them and so on. And then it's a balancing act. And a lot of it is intuition, a lot of it is feeling, and a lot of it is just seeing things take place, like in tournaments where, like if everyone's playing Terran, then clearly there's a problem, right? So then you look at the Terrans and you go, what's making them OP? What are people using? What are they destroying? Is there a counter to this strategy? And so on. And especially in an RTS that has multiple sides that are not congruent, there's a lot to take into consideration. So it's very difficult to balance an RTS, especially when you have ambiguities between the different races that you can play. That's basically how it's done. You start with the spreadsheet, you do unit testings in the game, you play internally a lot, and then maybe if there's pro players, you can bring them in to do testing, but ultimately it's just going to take time to balance something. There's no such thing as a perfectly balanced RTS, unless they are 100% equal sides, like if you're playing human versus human in Warcraft 2, obviously there's no issue there, but those don't make for very interesting RTSs these days now, do they? Regarding the random factor in items being dropped by neutral camps, dropping certain items like Book of Dead, Wand of the Wind, or certain aura items could result in an unfair advantage for one of the players, simply because of luck. Wouldn't it be better for neutral camps to drop some kind of currency that could be exchanged for general use items in the neutral shop? Well, first of all, I believe that in the melee maps, the drops are consistent, so you kind of know where they are and what they would drop. I'm not 100% sure on that. I know we discussed it at some point, but I actually don't remember how that turned out. Why don't we look at that? Let's open a melee map. Let's open Garden of War. Here we have a camp, 100% random level 4 permanent item. Okay, I remember what we did. So during the balancing of drops, what we did was we categorized them by levels. So these are considered level 4 items. And so it becomes another balancing act of what constitutes a level 1 item versus a level 2 item, and generally they should be roughly on par with each other. So you'll see here, yeah, a Rod of Necromancy, if that drops as opposed to the other person gets, what, a Potion of Speed? Yeah, the guy with the Rod of Necromancy definitely, see, I would maybe bump that up to a level 2. But regardless, like, there's a lot of balancing that can happen here. But it was decided early on in the development of Warcraft 3 that compared to StarCraft, Warcraft 3 would have more randomness in it. And that is reflected here in the potential for item drops being not necessarily as useful between camps. That said, I think that they're okay in terms of what you can get, and relatively inconsequential, though a Rod of... I would definitely bump that level 1 Rod of Necromancy to a level 2. That seems a little bit wacky. So while you're correct that it would be better in terms of fairness to give currency, which then could be exchanged for items, that could be like a separate currency, like creep currency or neutral currency, something like that. I just don't think it's that fun. And there are maps that don't necessarily have a place to purchase anything, so every map would then have to have a neutral shop, which you don't necessarily want to do. It would be more fair but more limiting, and I think that the random factor in Warcraft 3 is something that people generally accept, like the randomness of crits and things, which all were discussed we had discussed at some point, like a long list of things that could potentially be removed to make it more fair and balanced, unlike Fox News. Warcraft 3 is known for many micro-intensive mechanics, performing surrounds on enemy units to prevent them from escaping, focus firing with ranged units, path blocking, often done by Night Elf players with wisps, denying your own units to prevent other players from getting XP, evading enemy projectiles by using item skills at precise timings, and many others. Were these mechanics taken into consideration already at game development stage, or was it something that was discovered by professional players? It was discovered by professional players. These mechanics were not necessarily thought of as useful or even good. For example, denying XP, definitely something that we didn't discuss or consider and did not like when we started seeing it being used. Evading enemy projectiles is pretty much a bug. Using items and skills at precise timings, that was of course sort of expected. That's certainly something we thought about. Now in terms of surrounding enemy units, like pathing was always problematic in the game and was just sort of seen as something we accepted because it couldn't be overcome in the time that we had. There's something about pathing for games that is always problematic. Maybe it's less problematic these days, but like nav meshes and things like that, all these crazy solutions that take a lot of time, like we couldn't do those things. But if it were up to me, I would approach that element again, and I would have it such that big units could push their way through small units. And I know that's controversial because some people are like, no, this is part of the skill. And I'm like, well, then it's also part of the skill to know which units can block other units. And then it becomes a whole another level of mastery there. But yeah, people don't like change. Nowadays, many games have a monetization system based on skin and cosmetics. Wouldn't it be possible to add something like that in Warcraft 3 Reforged for the game to be more profitable for the studio? For example, adding Burning Blade or Warsong stylized skins for orc units. That would be cool in my opinion. Yeah, there are certainly many ways that Warcraft 3 Reforged could have been monetized to make a lot more money and satisfy the angry, profiteering gods of capitalism. But I don't think that's necessarily what people would want from Reforged. I would save that for Warcraft 4. I think Reforged, everything that was being planned for it was quite cool, and I think everyone would have loved it. It would have been in the same vein as when Warcraft 3 released what games were at that time, which is that they were completed products that you played and enjoyed and created with for years to come without having to do additional monetization or anything like that. If anything, I would say that customized skins would be something you would earn through playing the game. And let's say that you finish the Orc campaign, you get a custom skin. Maybe multiplayer stuff could give you skins, and playing a certain amount of matches could give you skins. Like, those are the sorts of things that back in the day that we would do, that we've sort of lost now in this age of monetization where everything has to be monetized, that I hate. Was there something in Warcraft 3 story that surprised you, shocked you, made you angry, or you agreed fully with? How was the developer's reaction to the character's story, like Arthas' fall? We all enjoyed the storyline, generally speaking. Was not totally happy with the ending. It was kind of a bit of a Deus Ex Machina with the blow a horn and the Night Elf spirits jizz on Archimonde. But yeah, my favorite moment, of course, is Arthas' fall. That's something that really spoke to me. It's this journey from good to evil, effectively, but really it's the steps along the way and how someone can go one step at a time towards thinking they're doing the right thing when they're actually on a dark path, and then by the time they recognize it, it's too late. Though I wish Arthas had struggled a little more, just a little bit more struggle with like some of the things he was doing. Because he was very much self-righteous the entire way through, and people blame that on the Lich King and whatever, but I think it might have been more interesting to sort of showcase how he did question it, but that doesn't make for a very conducive thing for every match is a fight kind of game like Warcraft 3. Did the campaign design start during alpha beta test or other time period? Did the old models, units, characters, designs have any impact on the current design of those campaign levels? So it's difficult for me to answer the second part of the question, but I can tell you the first part of the question. The campaign design basically didn't start really until we were fully on the This is War 3 boat, which is to say that we had determined the direction, that it was more RTS focused than RPG focused, and we sort of had all the main characters in mind, with a couple exceptions. I'm sure the old models and units were used or reused for the most part. The only one that I can really think of that didn't make it through was the orc chieftain model, the guy on the wolf. I think that got repurposed or set aside. In By Demons Be Driven, Manoroth's Earthquake ability was changed to Finger of Death. Was Manoroth originally intended to be a final boss, but instead he ended up only appearing in the cinematic? I do remember the talks about what this mission would be, and Manoroth was definitely intended to be a boss that you would fight. But because the cinematic featured the characters defeating him, it was sort of decided that no. And there was even plans to have the canyon in the back of that mission, but that didn't work out. So let's open By Demons Be Driven, actually. Let's see this. Yeah, see, the plan was to have the canyon somewhere in this map, and we just, I guess I didn't know about it. But you see how it's all canyon-like, and I put a lot of canyon stuff, and like these are supposed to look like canyons, but I didn't quite make the canyon that was supposed to be part of a backdrop, because I figured you just wouldn't see it during gameplay. But now that I'm looking at it here, where you defeat Grom Hellscream, I definitely could have done it. Definitely could have built a canyon out here, and that just make it inaccessible with, like, you know, I don't know, something, but something you could view. Oh well. I guess that's one of those things that I would have changed if I had thought about it more, but I didn't even know what the cinematic was when I was making the map. I just knew that it took place in a canyon, and that they defeat Manoroth, and therefore you can't defeat Manoroth in the map. But yeah, originally you were going to fight him. I think that was an early idea, was that you're going to fight him, but it was not written as such by Metzen. Therefore, it was never part of the campaign plan, and I guess we just didn't put the canyon into the map.
We must face Manoroth in the canyon.
Oh well. Did they do it in Reforged? I don't actually know. In the last mission of Reign of Chaos, if Tyrande casts her Scout ability before the human base is destroyed, Archimonde would summon a dark portal at the location of the Owl Scout, and he casts other spells when player attacks him. However, if player attacks Archimonde after losing the human and orc bases, he would only attack without casting the spells. Why? Is a bug. Is a bug in the AI. I remember something about that, but I don't know specifically what the bug was or why he behaved that way. But yeah, early on you can distract him, and later on I guess they turn it off. They turn off his ability to cast spells because of that. And unfortunately, opening the map wouldn't help, because the problem is it's in an AI script, I believe. Actually, you know what? Let's open it up anyways and take a look. This map is chunking. Okay. There's a couple trigger safeties here that I'm seeing. Basically, if he's being kited, or if it's over, basically, he does moves and then attack moves. So it seems like there's still ways to F with him. But that would be why he would stop casting, because he's being ordered to move. And it seems like that safety towards the end would be something that would cause that. So if you distract him too much with spells, like, he'll just move straight there. But the main thing is that the behavior where he casts spells at the sentry is that's a bug. He doesn't have an AI script, but I don't see enough triggers for Archimonde's behavior here. So that's kind of weird. Yeah, that's just a bug. And I believe it's in his AI script. But I can't find his AI script or what AI script they used, so it may be a custom AI script. I don't know whose map this even was, but hopefully they can answer that question. There were players who used Goblin landmines to kill Archimonde. Does it prove that the damage from landmines is pure damage which could not be reduced by Divine Armor type? Yes, the Goblin landmines are pure damage. They are effectively true damage. And you can see that if you look in the unit editor. There they are. How do Goblin landmines work? I don't actually know. Oh, I wish I had a search function. I wonder how much time was lost when making our campaign maps just to trying to find things that we didn't remember. It's just a great example of that, where I can't figure out how Goblin landmine works. There it is. These look like a hack. And I'm suspicious that they were kind of hacky, but I know they're true damage. I know it because I tested it. Armor does nothing. So full damage amount is 700. If you're within 150 of the mine, you take 700. No matter what your armor is or anything, because this is just straight up boom. Then the partial damage amount is 300. So if you're in between 150 and 400, so 151 or to 400, you take 300. The in-game description of the Divine Armor type, mostly used in campaign units for Archimonde, says Divine Beings only take damage from Chaos attacks, while it should be Divine Beings take only 5% damage from attack types other than Chaos. What is the reason behind this? Discrepancy? No, it's me being an idiot. So I have to take responsibility for this because I wrote all the tooltips in the game, and when it came to divine armor, I didn't understand it, and no one explained it to me, and because it's only on like 1 or 2 units in the entire game, it just didn't get caught. So my mistake is permanent. So I wrote divine beings only take damage from chaos attacks because I believe it was described to me that way when I wrote it, and then I just forgot. But writing divine beings take only 5% damage from attack types other than chaos would be a little confusing, so I'd probably rewrite it as divine armor reduces damage from all damage types except chaos. Why is there no playable Dreadlords in the Undead campaign of the Warcraft III Reign of Chaos? Primarily because it was sort of decided that they were all super deceptive and that giving the player control over one would make them less mysterious. So it just never sort of came up in the story that you would ever control a Dreadlord, because why would a Dreadlord who is deceptive and running all these schemes behind your back ever be controllable by you? It just didn't make sense story-wise. So that's one of those things where we avoided ludonarrative dissonance, which is to say when the game doesn't make sense in terms of what it's doing with you and the story it's telling. Maybe it's a bit of a missed opportunity. Metzen could have written a Dreadlord who changes sides or decides to help you out or any number of things, but we just said, eh. Why can't you build walls in Warcraft 3? So there was debate about this early on in development. I vaguely remember some of it, but effectively it was just that pathing was difficult enough, and then adding an additional layer of the player being able to build walls and cause more confusion would have been too much for the pathing. That might have been a cop-out, I think, later on, because we sort of figured out how to do pathing with like trees being knocked down and then potentially being resurrected and things like that. But I think at the time, given the limitations of the specs, maybe it was just too much. Ultimately, we decided that, you could use farms as walls, but I agree that it would have been interesting to have real walls, and I think that it was always kind of the split, but it was just decided that technically it was not achievable at the time. I imagine that could have been changed at some point, but we didn't. In regards to the Warcraft 3 engine, how much of it was used in World of Warcraft? What happened with the Alpha engine? This is sort of two different questions. So the Alpha War 3 engine became the normal engine, so nothing happened with the Alpha engine. And then in terms of how much of it was used in World of Warcraft, all of it. It was literally a code divide, and then now World of Warcraft builds on it. So 100%. Or at least it started that way. How much of it was stripped out and whatnot, I have no idea. But effectively, WoW is Warcraft 3 with a bunch of stuff stacked on top of it, which is quite interesting to think about. But if you've ever seen like some of the more complicated user-made maps, I think you can see how that's true. If Mike O'Brien's vision prevailed, do you think that strategy genre would be different today? Yeah, maybe a little bit. But if you think about it, how many RTSs that came after War 3 kind of copied the RPG RTS model that we did? Not many. Assuming that they would have ignored it the same way, nothing much would have changed. Would the strategy genre be different today? Potentially, but in ways that I could never possibly fathom. I just don't have that sort of level of backwards prediction. Like, I can't imagine what exactly would be different. Maybe Warcraft 3 would have utterly failed. I don't know. How long did it take to make a level in Reign of Chaos and the Frozen Throne? It's a great question with a very complicated answer, but let me break it down as simply as I can, which is to say that if it was a very straightforward map, like let's say that it's basically a few things happen in the story, but no big deal, so it's just going to have an intro and an outro cinematic, and the main part of the mission is that you're going to fight a couple AIs, and that's basically it. That's something that would take like 1 or 2 weeks, maybe 1 week, or even less, just to get it done in some way, especially if it's a smaller map and an early map. If it was a more complicated trigger map and like all sorts of stuff is going on, like the culling, for example, I remember it being almost 2 full months of me working on it. So the more that complicated the map, especially if you're like making your own AI and doing stupid shit like that, going to take a long, long time. I know that this question's in relation to planning things out, like for people who want to make their own campaigns. I would allot 1 week for simple maps, 2 weeks for large simple maps, and then for anything that's like has a complicated premise in terms of like, there's going to be a lot of triggers, dungeons, for example, where you need to have a lot of unique things and events happening and interesting stuff to find, then you want to allot at least 4 weeks, at least. And if it's a specifically a very complicated thing that you're not sure if it can even be done, 8 weeks.
for that map. Have you made any Warcraft 3 maps in your leisure time? No. No, I don't have any side projects or joke maps. Who came up with the jokes in Warcraft 3's ending credits? I often like to play the last mission again because I wanted to see those credit animations. Alan Dilling made the ending credit maps. Between him and Sammy and the art team, I think he got a lot of input from them, but generally I think it was Alan Dilling. Previously, you mentioned Metzen wrote Warcraft 3 mission stories and scripts, and the designers called dibs on missions that spoke to them. Can you talk about that process? Was there ever a fight over a mission? Why did you pick the ones you did? It's hard to remember, but basically, I'll describe the process again. We would sit around a table in a meeting room, and we would read the dialogue for the missions out loud. We would each take a character, so I would play Arthas or something, and we would do a reading. And then at the end of that, we didn't necessarily choose right then. It potentially could be assigned to someone. In the case of the culling of Stratholme, it was just a mission that really spoke to me, and so I immediately called dibs. And I remember Scott Mercer getting a little bit upset about it. He's like, I didn't think we were doing that. And I'm like, well, I don't know, I wanted the mission. Did you want the mission? And he's like, well, no, but I didn't know we were calling dibs on missions. And I'm like, well, now you know. Sometimes it was like, oh, it's a dungeon mission, Dave should do that. And it would just get assigned to me that way. Like the Dungeons of Dalaran didn't particularly speak to me, but because I was known for doing good trigger work, and a dungeon mission tends to need good trigger work, then I would get assigned the mission and things like that. And then anything with like a super complicated premise, like, oh, it has to have this wagon cart that moves around on its own, and it's not going to be AI controlled, so it all has to be done in the triggers, that would go to Michael Heiberg, because he was our lead tech designer, basically. So the first part of the decision-making process was basically who would be the best person to do this mission from a can they accomplish it standpoint, and then it would be assigned. Second would be who has strong feelings towards this mission, and then they might grab at it. And then the third consideration would be, does no one want to do this mission? Well, who doesn't have enough missions to do? Give it to them. And that did happen on a couple occasions, though I don't remember any specifics, so don't ask. I assume you and other designers were working on levels at the same time. If so, did you ever have a drive to make your levels better than the other designers? Personally, no. I never felt like it was a competition. I always felt like it was a cooperation. I know that not all the designers felt the same way that I did, and there were a few who decided that it was a competition, and then they would get weird about like hiding what they were working on. I'm not down for that. If I did something cool, I share it with everyone, and I want everyone to do the same. There was sort of like a mentality among a few people that like it was like a competition, and the worst level designer would be fired or something like that, but I just don't think that was necessarily the case. And also it's better for everyone if you're more cooperative in sharing ideas, because like who cares if you had some cool thing in your map, like if it could have been used in other maps too, you should share that and like then make everyone stuff cooler, and then the whole game becomes cooler that way. And I think the more people who have that mentality, the better overall it is for the game. And luckily there was enough people on Warcraft 3 that there was a lot of info sharing between us, except when time did not permit. But you could always go to other people for help when you needed it. What were some of the asset limitations you may have had as a level designer, and do you have any examples of how you got creative using something not the way it was originally designed? Oh, it's so hard to think off the top of my head. I know we would do things like, actually let me show you. Let's go to Dungeons of Dalaran. So, there were a couple tricks that we did use. We would repurpose things that weren't necessarily meant to be used that way. Like this, for example. This is actually a super shrunk down thing that I put on the table as a model, and then there's a way to play with the Z-axis. Anyways, that's one of the tricks, is that you could manipulate the Z-axis. Shrinking things up and down, and like this is meant to be a background thing, not a model on a table. That's one of my favorite things to do, which sometimes infuriated the artists because they're like, no, it looks goofy, but whatever. And there are other tricks where you could use special effects to pretend it's like a flame trap. Here I put lightning strikes on the doors when they opened, just for fun. Oh, there's a secret there. I forgot about that. And what else? Like the usage of the runes wasn't really a thing. I just made it a thing. I've forgotten the question. What were some of the asset limitations? Oh, asset limitations. I think the main thing was just that we couldn't get whatever we wanted. At some point, art was done, and we just had to use whatever was there. And so I think I've mentioned this before, but like there are certain items that are obviously like stupid, like the slippers of agility, for example. It's like Spider-Man's slippers. I don't think those are even going to be used. And then we just sort of use them for that. And then there's like a twig that we used for an early item, and those just came from like leftover icons that Sammy had made but weren't used for anything. And there are some quest items that are also basically that, where Sammy had made an icon just for fun. We didn't
necessarily know what we needed for the campaign items, and then it was just like, well, you know, art's done in that regard, so just use whatever you got. And so we did. There's a lot of them. Most of the keys, I think, ended up that way. There was a period where we spent like almost a whole week just going through all of the random art and like picking stuff out that we could put in and use for something. And that was cool. Hopefully that answers the question enough. When starting a new level, would you have to do any research on existing locations or other media as reference to the levels you would eventually build? No. No, we didn't. Because at the time, you know, what reference was there for most of these things? It was kind of like vague maps, and like maybe there was a Warcraft II level that you could look at, but not really. For the majority of them, we didn't really look at anything. For example, for Stratholme, I didn't look at anything. That was just sort of like off the top of my head. This is, I guess, what it would be. A lot of it was sort of like on the fly kind of stuff, because either nothing necessarily existed for it, or concept art existed, or the stuff in the previous game was just so old and archaic that it wasn't worth looking at. We probably could have done more due diligence there, but yeah. If you are making a location that is supposed to be something, certainly you should do some research. And also, when you're initially laying out the map, you have to consider all of the things that you need to have happen on the map, and you kind of want to build areas for those functions, and then build areas in between. That's sort of how I would do that. How would you playtest your levels? Did you rely solely on QA and their feedback, or would you and the other designers play each other's levels and give feedback beforehand? Whenever anyone completed a level, we would have everyone play that mission, and that continued close to the end of development, but at some point it became like we just don't have time to play each other's missions because we need to complete ours, and at that point we began to rely more heavily on QA and internal feedback. And I think it was around then that the artists were kind of mostly done with their stuff, and so most of them will be able to play campaign missions and give feedback, and once it's done with the triggers and stuff, they would go in and do an art pass, and then we would get it back and we'd fix the triggers that they always would break. Then there would be a sound pass as well. So we relied on everyone's feedback, and I think the rushed nature towards the end maybe was detrimental to certain levels because of that. So I wish that we had continued that process the entire time and just taken the time to do it, as opposed to rushing through and everyone was like, I just got to finish mine. I can't worry about your stuff anymore. It's not a good attitude, but it was forced upon us by the schedule. What studios do you feel evoke the mentality of the old school Blizzard you remember? The good parts, not the toxic stuff. This is a good question, but difficult to answer until I've worked at those studios. What people propose their company culture is as opposed to what it actually is tends to be two different things. In terms of like who espouses that mentality of the old school Blizzard, I think a number of studios do, and ironically most of them have been under the Microsoft umbrella, which is to say that they're owned and funded by Microsoft. So In Exile is a good example. I felt pretty good there, though obviously didn't get to have a permanent job, but oh well. In terms of other studios, you know, if I didn't work there, I can't really say. I have no idea, because they can evoke a certain mentality, but is it real? I don't know. The more I interview with certain companies and people, the more skeptical I become of their future potential to continue to make good games. CD Projekt Red being one of them, and Remedy has me worried a little bit. Again, I never worked at those studios, so just one interview is not enough to really tell what a company culture is. You kind of have to work there for almost a year before you're really going to understand what's going on. Though actually I'm getting better at it, and I can sort of figure out the company culture within the first few months. There's something to be said for that. But until I'm hired there, who knows? Or work with them, which is also potential to have happen. That's it. Now that that's done, I think I can solidly say that my part in the Warcraft AMA is absolutely done. I definitely cannot answer the rest of the questions that we still have on the books. I hope you enjoyed my final part in the Warcraft AMA. I had a lot of fun working with Ablehawk on this one, and that's it.